I'd like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be recorded and that the recording will be subsequently made available for public listening. Paula, if you could take us through the business of the day, please.
I have apologies from Councillors Gilroy and Nicholl, and Councillor Dryborough has indicated he will be attending later in the session.
Thank you. Declarations of interest. Councillor Blake, Councillor Diggle and Councillor Geddes. Councillor Blake.
Item number 5, I had some involvement in this before I came on to planning.
Thank you. Councillor Diggle. Thank you. That's 6, 8 and 9. Councillor Geddes.
Item number 16, sir. I declared an interest at the time that this application was determined. I think it would be consistent and appropriate to do so as well in relation to its appearance here before us today. 16.
Thank you. Although that item was just before noting, there's no debate on it, but I'm grateful to you for making that statement anyway. Councillor Dick.
Item 8, as I live in one of the mentioned streets in this application, and although it's for noting, I would declare an interest in the same grounds as Councillor Geddes on item 15.
Thank you. And I have a declaration, item 6. I've been in communication with members of staff in relation to this particular application and the Community Council, and it may be in the interest of public perception that I declare an interest, having been involved in the debate relating to the item being brought before members today, so I will declare an interest in item 6. Does that conclude all items of declaration of interest? I take it omitted to Sederunt, but that's okay, isn't it, Paul? Okay. We now go to the continued application. Go to the continued application where it's already in session, and I'll ask Paula first to reaffirm which members are able to participate. Councillor Geddes.
No, sir. I think with respect, minute of the meeting of the 11th of December.
My apologies, you're absolutely right. Is that a true record of the meeting that took place?
No, sir. In my view, it's not, because I asked, when I declared an interest using the term in quotation marks, sir, I indicated that my interest in item 6 was by virtue of the fact that I had been approached by someone known to me who, while not a representative, was seeking to enlist my support in having the application refused, and I determined in the circumstances that I would leave the meeting during the consideration of this item of business. I've already sent the appropriate paragraph, or what I think should be the appropriate paragraph, to governance in that regard, and with your leave, sir, as master of the proceedings, I'd be grateful if that in fact could be incorporated into this minute today as a revisal of the previous minute, because the way it's indicated in the previous minute is factually inaccurate, Chair, in my opinion.
In that case, I'm happy to ensure that takes place. Can you deal with that, Paula, please? Thank you, and my apologies for that. We now come to the procedural matter, which Paula will remind members and members of the public of the procedure that takes place today.
The Planning Applications Committee will consider each application in turn as detailed on the agenda. The case officer or an area planning manager or other appointed officer will make a short statement addressing the determining issues accompanied by digital images. Any late information, amendments or corrections will be reported at that time. Members may ask questions of officers following the presentation on points of clarification. For those applications which are in accordance with Council policy subject to public speaking, then the order of eligible parties being held will be as follows: third parties objecting to an application, third parties supporting an application, statutory consultees objecting to an application, elected members of Dumfries and Galloway Council who are not members of the Planning Application Committee, applicants and their agents. The Chairman will individually invite those who have registered in advance to speak in respect of an application to come forward, sit in the reserved seat and make their presentation, after which they may be questioned by committee members. No questions may be asked of committee members. When each presentation is completed, people should immediately return to their seats. After all the representations have been heard, the meeting is then in formal session, and no members of the public may address the committee from the public gallery. The Planning Applications Committee will then proceed to determine the application, or if the application is a major development significantly contrary to the development plan or a national development plan, apologies, agree a recommendation to be made to the full council, who will determine the application. A decision notice will be issued after a period of 48 hours has passed. The Chairman has been provided with a list of eligible representatives who have registered in the period specified in Council policy. These individuals have all had their registration to speak confirmed and no other persons will be allowed to speak. Representatives have been placed in alphabetical order. A copy of the public speaking list is available from the committee officer taking notes of our proceedings. Representations on planning applications must be made on the basis of valid planning matters only. Certain matters are not material planning considerations and will not be taken into account by the Council when deciding on an application. Representatives are encouraged to use the time allotted to clarify any of the points they consider material and to address the determining issues. Representatives should not raise any new matters without explaining why they were not raised earlier with the case officer. Please do not repeat what is in the report, as members will have read the report. Presentations will be strictly limited to 3 minutes per person, excepting for national and major developments, which by their very nature are more complex, where the time limit will be 5 minutes. This should allow sufficient time for interested parties to make relevant points. The Chairman of the committee will ask you to come to a conclusion if you take too long. I also have just received apologies on behalf of Councillor Maitland.
Thank you for that, Paula. We will now go to item 4, 3234 Scott Street, Annan, planning application for formation of vehicular access, 13/P/4/0336. This is an item where we're already in session, and I'd ask Paula first to remind us of the members that are able to participate in the determining of this application.
Chair, Councillor Dick, Councillor Blake, Councillor Carruthers, Councillor Dryborough, Councillor Geddes, Councillor Groom, Councillor Maitland, Councillor McCautry, Councillor McComb, Councillor Ogilvie, Councillor Stephen Thompson, Councillor Ted Thompson and Councillor Alistair Witts are all eligible to participate.
Thank you, Paula. We are in... And Councillor Diggle. Thank you, Councillor Diggle.
I think I'm eligible. I wasn't. I think I'm eligible for item 5.
Okay, fine. So we're on item 4. We have the case officer, Carla McWhinney, with us. The presentation has already been made. We are in session. We're simply now at the determination process of that application. Although Carla is available, should there be any additional questions for members. And David has suggested that we should have the slides again just to refresh members' memory of where we are. So if we're happy to do that, Carla, can you take us through the slides, please?
The first slide shows the application site outlined in red. It includes the boundary of the curtilage of both number 32 and 34 Scott Street. The block plan shows the position of the proposed access and associated parking and driveway. The parking and driveway do not require planning permission and are not included in the assessment of the proposal. Looking east down Scott Street, the number 34 and number 32 Scott Street are on the right-hand side of the photograph. Closer view shows number 34 Scott Street, which is a 2-storey white building. Number 34 is the adjacent single-storey building. And number 34 is the white building. Number 32 Scott Street is the single-storey adjacent building. And number 26 Scott Street is adjacent to number 32. The final slide shows the footway over which the proposed access would be formed. Thank you.
Thank you, Carla. Members? Councillor Ogilvie? Councillor Brothers?
Thanks, Chair. After the site visit, it was even more apparent that there would clearly be a road safety issue there. Living in Annan, I know many times during the day that there's cars parked up and down that part of the street, either the church or the nursery school. It's adjacent to the church. Many times there's funerals, and at night a lot of people come home and park. We got quite a clear demonstration. If you're putting a car out between 2 cars that were parked either side of the proposed driveway, they would be coming out blind, which is quite a busy part of the Annan entrance. So I personally feel that from road safety issue that we should refuse this.
Thanks for that, Councillor Ogilvie, are you making a proposal or are you prepared to wait and see what other members have to say?
Sorry, I'll wait and hear what others say, but that's my view at the moment.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Carruthers?
Thank you, Chair. It's similar views in regards to the road safety issues that were there. There is a lot of access already off that street. The site visit was it was a good visit in regards to we went all over the visibility displays, the concerns that have been raised at the previous committee session. We did get the chance to look around the back so we could see the whole picture, which was put it really into context. I do share a lot of safety concerns, road safety concerns, same as Councillor Ogilvie. Go back to a previous application back in 2008, shared the same concerns then. This is at a much lesser level. But I would be keen to hear what other members were saying as well, same as Councillor Ogilvie.
Thank you for that, Councillor Carruthers. Any member wish to make a contribution? Councillor McCaughey.
Thanks, Chairman. I mean, I think the site visit was useful from the point of view of actually seeing the traffic problem, because one thing I did note, if where they intend to take the entrance, if there's a van parked there, you'd be right into the middle of the road in order to get your sight lines. And the one thing that was very noticeable at that particular point, although perhaps there's a 30-mile-an-hour limit at the entrance to Annan, the traffic was certainly at that time of day doing far more than 30 miles per hour. And in view of the attitude of Police Scotland towards traffic things, the chances of the police taking any action are pretty minimal. And I don't think we should be encouraging a higher incidence of road accidents in that area. So I think that I would tend to support what the two local councillors who have far more knowledge than anybody else in this committee, and I would certainly support them in this endeavour.
Thanks for that, Councillor McCaughey. Any other members? Councillor Blake.
Just really to agree with what's been said, I think the site visit was very worthwhile, especially the time of day that we called. Compare the traffic on that at that particular time with the traffic shown on the slide, which must have been Sunday morning maybe. It was significantly different. It's the same road safety concerns, not so much pedestrian concerns. They were explained and discussed on the day. But road safety, you would need to almost go into the other side of the road to turn in either direction. I would certainly say refuse it.
Thanks for that, Councillor Blake. Councillor Geddes.
Well, can I say, sir, that Councillor McCaughey's comments in particular resonate with me, on the back of what the two local members have said. But can I ask, I hope I'm not causing any problems for either Paula or Mr. Sutty, but, I've no problems in supporting what's being suggested, subject to the proviso, Chair, that that's deemed to be a stateable ground for refusal in planning terms.
I think that's a valid question, and I'll ask Mr. Sutty to respond to that.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd obviously be interested to hear the precise wording for why it's going to be refused. The two issues I would bring to your attention are obviously on page 16 of your agendas, is that there's no objection from the local roads officer. So such a decision would clearly be going against the professional advice you've been given by the relevant roads officer, so you would have to recognise that any decision you made that way, you would be effectively going it alone and contrary to their advice. And just a reminder that because currently you look for 2 spaces per dwelling, you've got 32 and 34 would have an on-street demand for 4 parking spaces. By demolishing one of those properties and putting 2 spaces off-street, you're actually freeing up those 4 spaces that currently would park on the street by reducing the demand and putting parking off-street. So in terms of increasing car parking on-street, that clearly can't be a reason that you would have. So if you have these concerns, it would have to be more or less in lines with you think the visibility wouldn't be acceptable, or some other reason that I can't quite see that. And you've got the roads officer's comments there. If you can give me some wording that you think would justify it being refused that isn't going to contradict what you've got from the roads officer, that would obviously be useful.
I think I've got Councillor McCaughey and then Councillor Carruthers. Did Councillor Diggle indicate wanting to speak as well? No, in that case, Councillor McCaughey.
Just to say that there's no increase in parking provision in that area, because in order to accommodate the 2 parking spaces that are off-road, you're requiring a drive to get into these parking spaces, which you immediately lose 2 parking spaces on-road. So there's no greater parking provision in the area. They're just transferring 2 parking spaces at the side of the road to behind the house. Because in order to access the 2 behind the 2 that are in the garden of the property, then you're losing 2 parking spaces on the roadway in order to access the 2 in the garden. So there's no increase in parking provision by granting this application. So it makes you wonder why are they doing it, pulling down a perfectly good house in order to accommodate 2 cars which can currently park on the roadway.
I think the officer's opinion is we will lose 1 car parking space on the road and achieve 2. I think that's what the report says, and we're not here to debate what the officers have to say. If there's a valid proposal, that will be dealt with in session. So I've got Councillor Carruthers and then Councillor Thompson.
A concern I also have in regards to looking at the conditions, maybe I could be corrected, but it's in regards to whether it's approved or refused at any point in time, the further use of the land, what it could actually be used for. If it was, say it was to be approved today for whatever reason, and are the conditions sufficient enough to safeguard the amenity in that area? In other words, it doesn't create an access to further development behind. I mean, I'd like a clarity on that point, please. Is it conditioned in such a way it's only for that particular use?
No, you won't get that because the officer was quite clear when she made a refreshing or refreshed the overhead projections that we had, that we are not here to debate the planning, the parking arrangement today. That's no part of the application. This is simply an access arrangement that we're being asked to approve today, and that's the only element of the permission that we can discuss. But I'll just ask David or Paula to reaffirm that, Carla to reaffirm that.
Yes, and basically the application is for a vehicular access. It's been confirmed it would be for the domestic property, the one domestic property. And therefore, really all you can look at is a vehicular access for that domestic property. Anything else is hypothetical and would have to come forward in the future. So unfortunately, it's the situation where we've got to deal with the application that's before us, not other things that may come before us in due course.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. It's actually just on that very issue that we're not considering the parking in the driveway as suggested in the drawings. So whenever we're talking about the loss of parking spaces on street, we can't really hypothesize that there might be additional spaces. So really we're talking about the loss of parking spaces on street.
Yes, and the legitimacy of the access arrangements, because there's quite specific references to the height of the wall, the way the access is constructed. But our consideration today is restricted to that. David's quite right. What may be applied for in the future is something that some other committee will have to determine should that ever occur. Councillor McCaughey?
Yeah, I think that would loss of amenity be a reasonable ground for refusal? Bearing in mind that on-road parking is an amenity available to everybody, on-road parking is not associated with one particular property, and therefore by doing away with on-road parking, that is a loss of amenity to all properties within the area. So would a loss of amenity count as a reasonable reason for refusal?
I'll ask David, but I would suggest to go back to the point that was made in the report, where you lose 1 car parking space on the road and you gain 2 off-road. But David, would you like to respond?
No, the amenity applies to everybody in the locale. The parking spaces off the road are only for the use of the person making the application. Therefore, it's a loss of amenity to the general public, because the spaces on road are not designated to particular houses.
It's a very generous interpretation of amenity, because there's no right to use an on-street public space for parking. Rephrase that. There is no right for a house that has no off-street parking to consider that it is their right to park outside their house. That is the public road. Now, looking back at just what I was saying before, you've got an on-street demand from the 2 houses at the moment for 4 spaces. 2 would be off-street. You would have 1 house removed, therefore the demand for that one goes. What you would lose, obviously, is to have the access. You couldn't park in front of an access. So you've actually taken a demand for 4 on the street at the moment, satisfy it with 2 off street, and you lose one from the access. I find it hard to see how that would be actually a loss of amenity. And it's really more to do with road safety as the issues that was picking up originally. I'm struggling to see how you can make that an amenity issue, to be honest.
Councillor McCarthy, you want to come back in? Then I've got Councillor Carruthers.
Because the point I'm making, there may well be 2 houses there and 4 parking spaces outside these 3 houses. But these houses have no say over those 4 parking spaces. If I live round the corner, I'm perfectly entitled to park there. And therefore, that's why I'm saying loss of amenity. It's not loss of amenity to these 2 houses. It's loss of amenity to anybody, including the hotel across the road, where I might want to go in there for a bar lunch and I might want to park there. I'm now losing the right to park, and therefore that is a loss of amenity in terms of everybody in that locale. Not the amenity of these 2 houses, a loss of amenity to the general area.
Before we get too hung up on that one, we have Councillor Carruthers looking to come back in and Councillor Dick for the first time, and then we'll maybe get somehow summarise where we are. Councillor Carruthers.
Thanks very much, Chairman. I mean, like I say, the site visit was invaluable in regards to, you've seen what was actually happening on the ground. I think it's general policy too, I think it is, road safety issues. That's where if I was going to move to refuse this, which I probably will, because of what we've seen on the ground in regards to general policy too, which is road safety issues, and it's because of the lack of the actual visibility when you're there. We've seen the cars, the way it was, the speed of the traffic that was oncoming. There's a lots of accesses already been granted permission in the past or whatever, whether it was by virtue pre-47 or after 1947. At some point, there's a lot of accesses there, and I think it's just one too many. And that's the reason I would be looking to, if I was going to move a recommendation for refusal. I'd still like to hear what other members are thinking.
Okay, you have a few minutes just to summarise your thoughts while Councillor Dick comes in. Councillor Dick.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask on what grounds the refusal was confirmed at the previous applications. I'm assuming it would have to have been on the same basis as road access and road safety. Could I just ask for some clarification on that? Because as Mr. Sutty rightly pointed out, the professional opinion of the local roads officer is as stated. I'd just be interested to find out what had happened before.
David, do you want to reply to that?
Yeah, Carla maybe has the exact wording there, but from memory it was to do with the impact on the street scene from the removal of the house, because the original application was for the formation of the access and the demolition of the house, even although technically the demolition didn't require planning permission.
Sorry, I don't have the exact wording as to the reason why, but from memory it is because of the impact on the street scene due to the demolition of number 32.
Okay, any other member wish to make a contribution? In that case, Councillor Ogilvie.
Yeah, I mean, I hear with interest what I'm being advised. If what David's saying is that every time an officer puts a recommendation in, we just don't overturn it, which I find strange because we're here to determine it. We take advice, but sometimes we go against that advice. So that's what he said. So I'm just saying we've got a view.
Before we go any further, though, I'd have to say that what David said was that was professional advice.
Yeah.
And all you have to do is say, in your opinion, although the professional advice is valid, your opinion is
I'll just come to that, Chair. I'll just come to that. The road officer's report is correct by planning laws, but the sight lines are affected when you're joining the traffic. If you come out the proposed driveway and there's quite a broad street, that's fine, you can see. But once, because on the day there was a member's car there, which was quite a large car, and it was roughly where the driveway would finish. You'd have to come out there blind. You see there, but then you've got either a van or a large vehicle. Your sight line is then disrupted. So I think that there is a road safety issue there. Plus, taking on board what Councillor Carruthers was saying, there is off-street parking on there, but I think this is over-provision now. And it's right opposite the exit for the Firth Hotel. So they've got the same problem coming out that way. So you've got cars coming out nose first into quite a heavy traffic volume. So I still feel there's a road safety issue there, Chair.
Okay, that's fine. Councillor Geddes, did you want to make a contribution?
Well, it was just to go back, sir, to what I said earlier. I mean, I have no, provided that we can, give a stateable ground for refusal, I have no problems in supporting that. I would go back to the point that Councillor Ogilvie made, and one case that particularly sticks in my mind was the life of the previous council, where there was an application for a wind turbine outside the village of Pophill, where the planning officer recommended it be granted. The committee at that time, myself included, refused it. The applicant went to appeal and the reporter, surprise, surprise, upheld the views of the decision of the elected members. So while at the end of the day we're obliged to consider the professional advice that's put before us, it's there as advice. It's meant to guide us, not to enslave us, Chair. And I think that point, should be reiterated.
I think every member, thanks for that, Councillor. I think every member is aware of that. Why we are here is because we are being asked to agree the professional opinion of our staff. And if for whatever reason you wish to vary that, provided that justification is legitimate, you're absolutely entitled to do so. And that's taking account of factors that the local members sometimes have knowledge of, sometimes intimate knowledge of, and there is absolutely no problem, I don't think, with any member making a decision, a legitimate decision based on their personal view. Councillor Crothers and then Councillor Blake.
Thanks very much, Chair. And in that case, I would move that formally that we refuse this application on the grounds of general policy 2. I do agree with Councillor Ogilvie in regards to, if I was looking at it as a blank canvas, you look down, it does meet the visibility displays, but because we've had the site visit, putting it into context, there is restrictions there, and it's 23 out of 24 hours a day, these restrictions that are there, we've seen that, putting that into context. So for those reasons, if you need any more specifics other than that, I can come back.
Okay, I have Councillor Blake, and then I'll ask Paula professional advice before we ask David to summarise the position that members find themselves in. Councillor Blake.
I don't want to labour on the point of professional advice, but there are many cases where professional advice is invaluable in planning matters. On road safety in particular, but in this particular case, we're talking our own personal experience. Like myself is 45 years of driving, 30 years in the police service, many in the traffic department, that I could make a sound judgment myself in certain cases on road safety issues, and I think this is one particular one. And I think every member here would probably have similar experience, other than the police department.
Thanks for that, Councillor Blake. Paula, can you just confirm the legal position, please, and then I'll ask David to summarise.
Sorry, what I was actually wanting to come in was Councillor Crothers. I do think you need to provide a little bit more background to why you feel it's contrary to general policy 2. The issues that I've sort of picked up on that you might want to consider are things such as you consider that the visibility is not acceptable, that it is not, it would impact negatively on road safety and on the adjacent road network, that sort of issue. So, the specifics of general policy 2 you're tying this to, please.
That sums it up very well. The only thing you missed out there, Paul, is in regards to the amount of accesses that are already there and the natural obstructions that are there, that when you look on as a blank canvas, you don't see them. When you look at it, there is cars and obstacles and traffic that I would say, putting it into context through the site visit, and many times we'd be going up and down that road on a regular basis. The travel naturally at a higher, the top end of 30, very near 30 plus. It's no somewhere you'd see traffic moving at 20 mile an hour or below.
Thanks, thanks, Councillor Crothers. So what you're saying is that the visibility display in some circumstances may not be acceptable, and that the addition of one more access onto the main thoroughfare would compromise public safety. And I think if David wants to add to that, I don't mean David wants to add to that, sorry, confirm that that's acceptable as an explanation of GP2, I think we can go forward on that basis.
I mean, I think just to expand on that, to maybe try and assist here, why I've asked Carla to show that photo is it is unusual to have a public footway that's as wide as that. So you're talking about bringing cars right across that, where you could reasonably expect people to be walking more than single file because they're used to being able to go across that, it is so wide. And then you've got to get a car between other cars where the visibility might not be great and the speeds are high. I think I'm trying to put into words what members are picking up from the site visit. Am I correct?
Certainly from my perspective.
Members that were on the site visit, I think we'll be happy to agree that. And if somehow we can get a proposal wrapped around that particular explanation, that might allow us a way forward. So in summary, Councillor Ogilvie, or Councillor Crothers, I think it was that made the proposal, Councillor Crothers.
I mean, from what I've said, and including also, I mean, it is a valid point that we all picked up on the day. We all noted that the width of the pavement is unusual. It's normally 6 foot, and that's some of the region of 12 or 13 foot. So the car's fully on the pavement blocking the whole access. I mean, it's an unusual design, I would say, just because of the historical nature of Annan in that area. mean, that could certainly be added in, taken into consideration as part of the removal, but I'd like to hear how Paul has summarised that as well.
I don't think Paula will summarise it. That's your proposal. Paula will tell you whether or no it's an acceptable motion, and if it is, we'll look for a seconder.
Right, well, certainly what I said earlier, if we could take that on board. Yep.
Paula, is that proposal acceptable?
Yes, the motion has been made. It's awaits a seconder.
Councillor Ogilvie?
If it stacks up against policy and we can move ahead, I'll certainly second that.
Okay, in that case, we have a proposal and a seconder that this application be refused on the ground stated. Is there any other view? In that case, Paula, can you confirm the decision of the committee, please?
The committee has determined to refuse the application on the grounds that the access is contrary to the general policy 2, the visibility is not acceptable, another access is not acceptable in that location, there would be a negative impact on road safety, emerging traffic would have to cross the footpath, and speeds of traffic in that area are higher than would be ideal for the number of accesses.
Thank you for that, Paul. Okay, move on to item number 5. Erection of Holiday Village, comprising 125 dwelling houses, leisure facilities, formation of 9-hole golf course and installation of sewage treatment plant at land between Loaningfoot and Gillfoot Farm Road, Southerness. We're asked to approve this application, and the case officer is Claire Eckstein. Claire, can you take us through this proposal, please?
Thank you, Chair. There's one change to the report on the list of representatives should include a Mrs. Burt of Oyster Catcher, Sandy Lane, Southerness. She was notified of the committee meeting, but the Royal Mail returned her letter with addressee gone away. So the proposal lies between Loaningfoot and Southerness, extending approximately 1.1 kilometres along the C22N. This is shows the site between Loaningfoot with the EVA in the top left-hand corner and down to Gillfoot Road at Southerness. And this just gives an aerial photograph of the area and site. This shows the northwestern end of the site, proposed with the golf course and facilities. You'll note that this is an indicative plan at this stage because it's a planning permission in principle. This shows the Southerness end with the houses proposed around a sort of lock and feature and the barrier in the corner for the Natterjack toad pond on the top right hand side. And then here's some illustrations of the design with the lock and feature proposed. Again, an outline of the housing with the lock and feature. This is a view taken from the Southerness golf course, looking towards Loaningfoot, and then panning right again, directly across from the Southerness golf course entrance, and then right again, looking towards Southerness. And this is down at the corner of the site at Southerness, on the corner of Gillfoot Road and the C22. The site itself is behind the sort of access gate there. And then back along the Gillfoot, up the C22. If you look in the centre of the photograph, there is a sign that will give you some in white, and that will give you some bearings for the next photograph. So this is taken from the centre of the site at the southern, towards the Gillfoot Road side. You can see the sign in the centre, so that's on the C22N. We're panning right again. You can see the clubhouse in the centre to right, and panning right again, right across the site, and then panning right again, and you can see Gillfoot Road and Southerness Holiday Village to the extreme right of the photograph. This is taking you back up to the other end on the northwest side of the site at Loaningfoot. I've marked up where the proposed EVA will be between the telephone exchange and Summerfield Cottage. And again, this is looking on the main road, looking at the telephone exchange on the left, Summerfield Cottage on the right. This is going some 130 metres into the site from the previous camera position, and this is looking along the site boundary, which is to the left of the fence, and that's looking southeastward towards Southerness. And again, panning right from the previous photograph, you can see it was a lovely day yesterday. Panning right again. And then this is looking towards Loaningfoot. And this is about 90 metres from the camera position. You can see the sort of telephone exchange. And these are close-up boundaries of the watercourse, which runs to the rear of Loaningfoot. The garden in the centre with the trees is the old schoolhouse. And then this is the rear garden along the boundary of the old schoolhouse. And this is the garden, close-up of the sort of watercourse and boundary that runs to the rear of Loaningfoot with the garden of the Clachan, which is adjacent to the old schoolhouse. The proposal is for planning permission in principle for a major development for a holiday village comprising of 125 dwellings, leisure facilities, golf course and sewage treatment works. As noted in the planning history in paragraphs 1.12 and 13, in the report, this site was previously granted planning approval, originally dating back to Cooperry County Council in 1975 and most recently in 1997. And the site is identified in the Southerness inset plan of the Nithsdale local plan in proposal LN19. Supporting information has been provided by the applicant, which is noted in para 1.10, relating to market needs assessment, environmental data for protected species and bird surveys on the Gillfoot Bay, sewage and drainage studies, transport assessment and access management plans. A full assessment of the proposal is contained in the committee report, and given the previous planning history of tourist development and that both structure and local plan policies D23 and GP33 are generally supportive of tourist proposals due to the contribution it makes to the local economy. Taking into account the impact of service facilities, transport network, local environment and landscape, the proposal is considered acceptable and in accordance with the tourism and associated policies. However, in order to prevent the site being sold off and split up, a Section 75 agreement is recommended, as noticed in paragraph 4.45 in the report, to ensure that the proposed houses remain linked to the comprehensive recreational scheme, which is the golf course and the leisure facilities, which are key justification for accepting the proposals. A separate holiday occupancy condition for the dwelling houses, number 9, is also recommended. There are also a considerable number of planning conditions for this application, which would form part of a future detailed application for the site and would include reserved matters relating to the layout, design, external appearance and landscaping, along with environmental mitigation measures, including the implementation of the access management plan, phasing, detailed designs of the sewage treatment works, safety measures for the golf course, lighting, public transport, access, parking and footways. The proposal is subject to the conditions noted and is considered to accord with policy, and a recommendation to approve is put forward. Okay.
Thank you, Claire. For the benefit of members of the public, EVA that Claire referred to twice is the emergency vehicle access that was referred to in the document. Do any members have questions for Claire? In that case, we'll have the first of the representatives. Given that this is a major application, each representative will be given 5 minutes to do their presentation to the committee. First objector is Mr. Peter Martin. If you'd like to come to the table, please, and just whenever you're ready, sir.
Good morning. As a resident of Loaningfoot, I'd like to point out that there appears to be a discrepancy in the details of this development. The planning application lists the inclusion of a 9-hole golf course, yet in the head of planning's report, under the section provision of parking, mention is made of parking for a pitch and putt course, but no mention of parking for a golf course. This report then discounts the genuine concerns of Loaningfoot residents regarding the potential for substantial noise pollution from this part of the development as being irrelevant. Is this proposed amenity a golf course or in fact a glorified pitch and putt course? If the latter, the potential for considerable noise pollution from holidaying families with attendant excited children is evident. The probability of situations arising which could incur the noise from alcohol-fueled joviality could also be expected. I will remind the committee that in the summer months, daylight hours can extend to 10 p.m. Also, the serious matter of loss of privacy by such a facility being so close to Loaningfoot properties is of great concern. Regarding the traffic situation, the volume of traffic passing our property during the summer months makes a mockery of a statement in the head of planning's report that generation is small and shows complete ignorance of the situation. Or perhaps the constant movement of traffic consisting of cars, caravans, lorries of all shapes and sizes, delivery vans, tradesmen's vans, tankers, tractors, buses, motorcycles, etc., are figments of my imagination. I strongly object to the intention of the developers of this project to solve the issue of sewage effluent disposal by dumping it in a ditch which borders 47 metres of our garden ground. As evidenced last summer, during dry spells, this ditch can be virtually stagnant for days or even weeks at a time. In such a situation, the prospect of a ditch being inundated with a supposed benign concoction from a sewage treatment plant is horrendous and would be tantamount to environmental vandalism, the legality of which would of necessity have to be explored and any advice received acted upon. I suggest the developers of this project seek other means of disposing of their sewage waste and refrain from regarding Loaningfoot as a convenient septic tank. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Just before you leave, sir, in case any members have any questions for you. Do any members have any questions for Mr. Martin? In that case, thank you very much, Mr. Martin. You take your seat again. We now have Ms. Josephine McSkimming, please, Ms. Josephine McSkimming. And again, you have 5 minutes when you're ready, Ms.
It's on speak. It's on speak. Okay. The residents of Loaningfoot have some real serious concerns regarding the sewage scheme, as Mr. Martin said. It's proposed that the treated effluent be directed through a wee burn or drainage ditch that runs directly behind 4 of the cottages and right through the back gardens of the old schoolhouse. I believe I have some pictures. This is the old schoolhouse, and it runs right through the back garden of the old schoolhouse and Magpie Cottage, just yards from the back door. We feel that this is repulsive and a risk to our health in spite of assurances to the contrary. This wee burn it's reduced to a trickle in the summer months when the expected occupancy of the holiday homes is at its height. In the winter, it's been as high as it's ever been, and fears of flooding if any additional discharge is likely due to the changes of the topography of the site. There's another picture that shows that how high it is and how close it is to the back door of the old schoolhouse. The recent climate change, we've had so much rain lately, and we've had unprecedented flooding in the back garden. It's been coming up like wells, and we're worried that because any additional flow into the burn would cause us flooding. The treatment plant itself is said to be situated 800 metres away from the nearest of the holiday homes and only 70 metres from the nearest house at Loaningfoot. In the original application, it says that it will be placed as far away as possible from the holiday homes to reduce the risk of smells, noise and other unpleasantness. It's, however, situated directly behind Loaningfoot, so we're going to bear the brunt of the pollution and unpleasantness as if we don't matter. SEPA has said it's not ideal, and they would have to strictly monitor the discharge up to 4 times a year with the option of enforcement orders if any pollution is found. It's too late for us should this happen. You can see the grandchildren in an earlier photograph playing in the burn. We're going to not be able to go into our back gardens because we're going to be worried about the pollution coming through the burn. The added mineral content of the water would lead to clogging up of weeds and eventually to pollution on the beach at Merse Head, where the burn eventually leads. You can see it there. It comes out very close to the Merse Head bird reserve, which is very worrying. I've taken legal advice, and my solicitor suggests that this amounts to an inadmissible overburdening of a small watercourse. We also object to the lack of privacy afforded by the close proximity of the proposed golf course, and we ask for a 40-metre buffer zone for our own safety and privacy. The traffic situation Mr. Martin has already spoken about, which we're very worried about. In a development of this size and magnitude, we feel that the sewage situation is ill thought through, and with several other alternative solutions, which would not have such a devastating impact on the residents of Loaningfoot. Surely it's imperative to get it right at this stage, rather than to store up trouble for the future when it will be too late. We feel rather victimised and angry at the lack of consideration afforded to us. The natterjack toads and great crested newts are given more protection than we are. Given the huge topography of the site and the expertise available, there has to be some alternative to pumping the waste products of upwards of 600 people through somebody's back garden.
Thank you. Does any member have any questions for Ms. Skimming? In that case, thank you very much. Members, we are now in session. David has an email which we've agreed to hear.
Thank you, Chair. This is from the applicant and agent. They apologise for neither of them being able to attend the meeting today, but did ask that I read out a short statement on their behalf. The applicant respects and understands the representations made in connection with the application, as any proposal of this size will raise concerns, especially given the limited detail and finality of design required by an outline application. Please bear in mind this is an application to re-establish the principle only of development on this site previously consented but now lapsed. The concerns raised include drainage, roads, facilities, wildlife, etc., will all be the subject of further detailed applications made by the eventual site developer for their specific layout and design. The limited detail shown on the current outline application shows a solution to these issues, not necessarily the final one. There has been enough detail provided to show the officers and statutory consultees that it is technically possible to comply with the policy requirements to consent the principle of a development in this location, as is highlighted several times in the officer's report, which the applicant feels is robust and detailed enough to deal with these representations at this current time. The conditions that are proposed to be attached to any consent granted are acceptable to the applicant, and once satisfied by future submissions, will provide enough detail to fully deal with all the areas of concern raised in the representations.
Thank you, David. Any member, any question for David before we go into session? Is it for David, Councillor McKee, or is it just in session? Okay. In session, Councillor McKee.
It's regarding the burn and the drainage and everything. Have you got any, can you show on the map the route of the burn? What I'm querying is, why does the sewage have to go into the burn before it goes past the houses in Loaningfoot? Can it not be put in the other side? And given what we've seen with regards to the flooding of those fields as they are at the present moment, and I appreciate it's been heavy rain and all that, but they've got to be drained, and the drains have got to run into, I would assume, that same burn somewhere. So is there another way that sort of facility can be addressed, the sewage and drainage, rather than incorporating what's running through that lady's garden?
I suppose there'll be an engineering solution for anything, and given that this is an application in principle anyway, that would be something that would be dealt with by conditions. And it's something that if ever it came to members, you'd be able to put a condition on. But before I let Councillor Carruthers and I'll ask David just to respond professionally with Claire, and then David as well.
Unfortunately, the plan's probably not enough of the area. Burn itself runs through the back of the houses at Loaningfoot, and then goes through the golf course, and the photograph that Ms. McSkimming showed it coming out at the Merse Head, which is at the nature reserve. That's where it eventually turns up. I think you can possibly just see the line in there's a sort of blue line on the plan to the left hand side, on the just by to the right of the. That's at Loaningfoot.
Happy with that, Councillor McKee? Okay, yeah. In that case, we've got Councillor Carruthers, Councillor Dick, Councillor Witts, and then Councillor Diggle.
Thank you, Chair. I think you answered one of my questions too. That was with regards to the detail. I think the detail you've said is it would come with the next application, and if that was to come, that would, as a major, would come in front of the committee again, if that would be the case. The Section 75 legal obligation within 6 months. Interested to see that. I haven't seen that before, that it had to be done within 6 months. Why? I mean, I can understand, I think it's actually quite a good idea in principle, but just hadn't seen that, a wee bit of explanation in regards to that. And if for some reason that Section 75 didn't come to fruition, what would happen?
I will ask David to respond to these questions.
Yes, I appreciate you probably haven't actually seen that, but it is something that we've been using more and more consistently, particularly for the larger developments. There's a tendency to let Section 75 legal agreements drag on without ever coming to conclusion. I can think of one fairly significant application that still hasn't been concluded that had a committee agreement about 2 years ago. So to prevent that sort of situation happening again, what we're trying to do is sharpen the pencils of all sides and make sure that the Section 75s are concluded quickly. So 6 months, or I think we've put in such other reasonable extensions. So in other words, if it's not going to be 6 months and one day we refuse it, if we know things are actively progressing, but it's really just to make sure that things aren't allowed to drift. The Section 75 is necessary. We wouldn't be in a position to recommend approval without it. So if the Section 75 isn't going to be simultaneously, then what we would want to do is refuse it on the grounds that without it, the development wouldn't accord with council policy and should be refused. So we have been using that more and more. In fact, that was actually just raised at a Scottish Government meeting I was at 2 days ago, where it was commended as a good practice.
And can you confirm for Councillor Carruthers whether or not this application is likely to come back, or whether it be then dealt with through delegated authority?
It would depend. If there were 6 or more representations, it would definitely come back to committee. It isn't actually a planning application as such, unless they put in if it's materially different, they would need to put in a full detailed application, which would be major, and that definitely would come to committee. If they are able to comply with the terms of the planning permission principle, then it would just be applications to discharge the conditions effectively. But again, representations are allowed in that, and if there were 6 or more, it would come to committee.
So if members have concerns about the mechanism for discharge of foul water, effluent, etc., it's something you might want to ensure that we have in a condition placed on the planning permission principle, so that it's dealt with, even if it's done with delegated authority. I now have Councillor Dick.
Yeah, just on the drainage and sewage, I would expect obviously some safe and acceptable proposal would come forward. What's puzzling me is why have we got a suggestion, even at this stage, that sewage and drainage would be discharged into an open burn? I mean, that seems to me to be ridiculous, something which I don't think any reasonable person would allow. But how has that permeated into the discussion on this item.
I'll ask David to respond, but I presume it would be treated first before it was discharged into a burn. It wouldn't be raw sewage, it would be the effluent, the outfall from a sewage plant, and that's normal practice in some cases. But David, perhaps you want to address that?
Yes, so just actually refer members to the top of page 28 of your agenda, and that's the SEPA comments, where they're advising that details of the proposed methods of the sewage treatment has demonstrated that the suitable sewage treatment plan could achieve the onerous discharge limit. So they're saying it is going to be it's going to be onerous, but you are looking for things to be treated in accordance with what are called the CAR regulations before SEPA would ever allow a discharge straight into a watercourse. So that there's no prospect of having raw sewage floating straight in a burn past somebody's house. That simply would not be allowed by SEPA under the CAR regulations.
Thanks for that, David. Councillor Witts.
Thanks, Chair. I know this area pretty well, and one thing I can say is that it's a pretty flat plain, and there's not much slope on it at all. So we have to look very carefully at the this situation with regards to the discharges. I note from again on page 28, I note the second paragraph says, in particular, stringent discharge limits is likely to require ongoing specialist involvement during the lifetime of the development. I must say that alarms me that that is in there, because it suggests to me that there is some concern about the sewage situation, and if it is suggested that it will require ongoing specialist involvement, that means almost as if it's a suggestion that are we going to anticipate problems here? I mean, why is it in there? And if it's in there, what is the regime for having ongoing specialist involvement once the sewage is set up? You know, are we going to look at it every year, or what? What does that mean?
David will do his best to answer. I would presume that in every situation there will be an involvement by SEPA in relation to outfall from sewage plants into water courses. But David, can you respond, please?
Yes, that's absolutely right. And basically what this is doing is setting out that in principle SEPA are satisfied that, don't forget, this is a planning permission in principle where the full details haven't been submitted, but they have got a contractor to look at this and submitted the information to show that it is technically possible to achieve this. But even a straightforward septic tank, if it's not maintained properly, can cause problems. So really what they're saying is that this is going to have very onerous discharge limits for the licence which SEPA is going to give them, and it's really just flagging up a warning that any developer is going to have to ensure that they meet these requirements and they maintain it properly throughout the lifetime of the development, which is pretty standard advice to anybody, to be honest, with any complex treatment plant such as this.
Councillor Witts, you want to come back?
Thanks, Chair, you're very kind. So, pardon me for my ignorance in these matters, but this is an outline planning permission in front of us in principle. So, if we are minded to accept, I presume the detail will come back later to us, particularly in terms of the sewage plant.
No, I think there's a potential for this to be dealt with by officers with strict conditions, and we would have to ensure that the conditions that we attach today are adequate to meet the needs of the planning application consent that we may be prepared to give.
Yes, I mean that's absolutely correct, because it's slightly different to the old outline planning permission and reserve matters. Since 2009, it's planning permission in principle, and you've got to load everything into the planning permission in principle, which is why you've got so many conditions. Of particular relevance on page 46 of your agenda, condition 12 is the one that really deals with the foul drainage issue, and that's quite an onerous condition, tying it in with the need to meet SEPA's regulations, the CAR regulations. So that's about as onerous condition as a planning authority could actually attach. It's requiring them to meet the very onerous standards that SEPA will set for this.
Thanks, David. Councillor Diggle, then Councillor Groom, then Councillor McCauley.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a bit at sea here because I don't think the plan we've got is particularly good, and what I'd like the officer to show us on this plan is the exact location of the Loaningfoot houses, the exact location of the new proposed houses, the exact course of the burn, and where the sewage plant is proposed.
Claire, can you do your best? I presume the exact location of the houses will still to be determined because this is just an outline or a planning application in principle, but Claire, can you deal with the other matters, please?
I'll just go through the photographs and the block plan. The houses will be to the sort of southern end of the site. You can see Southerness and the caravans, existing caravans. So basically, almost like the, and can you see the Southerness golf course to the underneath, below the C22 end. So the houses will be in that sort of almost that sort of rectangular piece of field just immediately above that, above the road. Yep, there we are. That's site here. And then the golf course in this area here. Loaningfoot up here. The EVA, sorry, emergency vehicle access would be there. If you look at the indicative design, next, this is the top end, so that's Loaningfoot there, and that's the burn running down behind the back of the houses and out beyond to the golf course. So this is the Loaningfoot end, and the next sheet shows the indicative design of the houses. So that's Southerness here, all the caravans, and then the main bulk of the houses would be in this area here, with the leisure facilities in the centre and the golf course to the left.
Just where the sewage plant is going to be and where the flow of sewage from the new houses will go, please.
The indicative position of the sewage treatment plant, make it out, is shown there.
Thank you, Claire. Satisfied with that, Councillor Diggle? Okay. We have Councillor Groom.
Mine's is just really more of an observation here. We're talking about, this is a large holiday area. Now we have problems already with safer beaches for tourists coming. I hope this is not going to add any extra on these beaches, because I don't think any of them have passed that yet, have they?
Well, probably no, but it's not for today that either. It's not part of the application process, but no, it's an observation. I'm grateful to you, Councillor Groom. Councillor McCaughey.
Are you going into open session now? Because I have no question to ask. Just wondering if I assumed everybody else has asked their questions.
I have Councillor Crothers, Councillor McComb, and then Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Chair. It was on the back of Councillor Diggle's question. It was, I'm just looking at it. It was Miss McSkimmon brought up we've seen photographs of the conservatory at the back of the house and how close the water course was to her and the difference in levels and such like. And I think that's Gillfoot. Is that Gillfoot she's at? Just in regards to the location to the burn, or is it Loaningfoot? And the direction, it looks as if for the plan she's uphill from the actual proposed development. I just want clarity on that, because that was a concern when I seen it. But it looks as if she's actually lying uphill from, so it puts it into perspective for myself what effect the proposal would actually have on upstream of it. I'm trying to understand that.
Claire?
Perhaps this photograph will help. This is the back of Loaningfoot, and the property, the old schoolhouse. See where those trees are? That's her garden. And if you look along the fence line here, and then obviously it goes into a garden, is where the water course ditch is here. So, and if you look at so that's her garden here, and then this is the one. Can you see that's the sort of fence line that I showed you previously, and you can see this property's, made a sort of bridge, which is the one immediately adjacent to her. So if I turn around the camera position, then that would be her garden, would be the, that's the burn that goes through her garden.
And is that adjacent to the golf course then? Is that the top end of the golf course, and is that uphill of the actual proposal?
Quite it's pretty level though.
I'll shoot you uphill or north, because what I'm trying to get and understand is the water flow, if the proposal was to raise the water levels, what effect that would have. I'm just trying to get an understanding, but it looks as if she's actually uphill, proposals below it. So I'm just trying to put that into context. And we think it would have a minimal effect, but it may well not be.
I think a simpler question might be, will the outfall from the sewage plant be above or below the location of the stream adjacent to that property?
I can't answer that question because we haven't actually got the detail that they've submitted
So
to us.
that'd be part of the
They haven't
engineering
actually
solution.
identified where the outfall would go at this stage.
The question, I mean, I suppose what I was trying to get to the bottom of, Chair, was what effect would the proposal have on the water table within that ditch? That's what I'm trying to get. But and if it's lying north, so gravity feed also is pulling it towards the sea. If that's lying north, you would imagine it had minimal effect, but there might be something there that has a rising effect. And because of there's no much difference between the water course level and the flow level in the house. So there's no a lot of difference there. I just wanted to try and get that into context.
And it may be that we place a condition on that makes sure an engineering solution deals with that, and because that's where we've been at before in the discussion of this particular application. But we can come back to that when we get to a stage of either agreeing or declining this particular application. We've now got Councillor McComb.
Thanks, Chair. This, as we've noticed, is an exceptionally flat, low-lying area. Is that the only watercourse draining this site?
Claire?
Site boundary, that's the only one I can see. Whether there's natural flow of water, I don't know. I think land drains. I would have to. I can't really answer that question, I'm afraid.
Fine, Claire. Thanks for that, Councillor McComb. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of points really, but one's just actually to do with the conditions in number 15 on page 47. We should maybe, if we're going, if this is the important part of the work today, then maybe we should clarify the said golf course hereby granted planning permission shall be brought into use unless approved mitigation measures. So maybe you should put a not in there somewhere, just to make sure that's not misunderstood.
David?
My apologies, well picked up, I missed that.
And a more general question, it's just to do with obviously the intention is a sort of tourism facility. So I'm noticing within the proposal that it's looking for community hall, etc. And there's a lot of facilities there that seem to would be an attraction to people coming into the area, which is obviously provided for under the, is it the General Policy 47, reflecting that recreational role of that area. But I'm sort of confused by that, and also in 4.19, I think it is, just about the traffic generation to the proposed site. It speaks about traffic generation to the proposed site, but then transport assessment shows the trip generation from the site is very small and likely to have little impact. But I'm sort of thinking if it's being defined as a tourism development, you would expect the significant impact to be the traffic generation to the site rather than just from the site. And if that should be sort of captured somehow, I don't know how that could be done. But also with that, if all the facilities within the site, are they for the residents of the site only? Is that the intention, or is it there to attract people from out with the site who aren't resident there? The likes of the community hall and the golfing facilities, pitch and park golf course, etc.
Again, that would probably be down to the developer, whether or not they chose to make it open to the general public or whether it was restricted to the usage. And that might be a condition that we might not be able to apply, but it's certainly something that Claire might be able to explain.
I can't answer that question at this time as to what the community facilities and whether they would just be closed to residents or open to just general public.
Stephen?
Thank you. But, I appreciate that, but I think that could probably have a significant impact either way, depending on whether it was a sort of residents only, holiday residents only, or whether it was open to the public in terms of the impact it has on the infrastructure and other services.
Mind you, in general terms, anyone can drive along that road at any time. So we have to be careful that we don't consider traffic volume on a standard AB class road, because it's something that's out with our control as planning authority in any case. Although I realise why you're asking the question, because of the impact on the local community. Councillor Carruthers. Councillor Diggle.
Thanks, Chair. I'm just wondering whether we have enough detail on levels here with the sewage. Is the sewage plant going to be higher than the houses? Because that's what it looks like on this map. And then I wondered whether any consideration was given about, I mean, if I was doing this, I think I'd probably take the discharge south, which would be an awful lot shorter. Has consideration been given about getting permission to take it that south way rather than north?
I think because it's an application in principle, that is still to be determined, and we can actually decide which direction we would request that certain engineering solutions are dealt with. David?
Again, I'll just address you to condition 12 on page 46, because we don't actually have that level of detail. So what it's requiring is that no development take place unless and until A, details of design and siting of full drainage from the sewage treatment works and any outfall from the site. So I mean, we don't have all the details of exactly what they're proposing as yet. Very often with a planning permission principle, the person that's applying is not going to be the end developer. And I think from the comments made by the agent, they did actually refer to, it wouldn't be necessarily the final solution to this one, and made reference to it being, yes, further detailed applications made by the eventual site developer. That the current applicant clearly is not intending to be the end developer here, and they don't want to go and get a fully worked up scheme themselves, given that somebody else might come in with a slightly different variation on that.
So I think, and I realise Councillor Dick's wanting to come in, but I think the point is we need to make sure that the conditions that our officers apply deal with the issues or concerns that we have, and the specific detail will be dealt with by delegated authority unless there are a whole raft of objections, in which case it would come back to committee and we'd be allowed to then to consider in more detail than we can today, because this is simply an application principle. Councillor Dick?
So in effect, one of the conditions could be that we could ask that any discharges to go into an open ditch which is built by the developer in a different place. I know that's been done by farmers before when draining land. That might be a perfectly reasonable way to deal with it and take any worry away from the residents who are currently concerned about the discharges into the existing burn.
I think a better mechanism might be in delegated authority to officers to deal with that, because what you won't be able to do is place an unreasonable financial burden on a developer unless there is an absolutely specific reason why that should be the case. Councillor McKee?
Just on the same lines, I quite agree with Councillor Ian Dick. Should we delete the reference to the water course to the northwest of the site? Delete that altogether and don't put that down as an option and see what they come back with. They should be looking at other means. We've got to look at, I don't know what the chances may be that these waters that have never flooded before may flood, given they've got to discharge surface water and water for the roads and all that sort of thing. So it may increase the flooding risk for these people, and obviously the house has only been built with that under consideration. I think we should delete discharge to the water course to the northwest of the site and encourage them to go search for another area to discharge.
I'm in members' hands with this. Councillor McCaughey?
Are we getting into open session here, Chairman? That's what I asked earlier on, so I want to come in open session. Or are we asking questions? Because if you're into open sessions, that's when you amend the recommendations. So let's decide if we're still asking questions or into open session.
We've been in session for a considerable time. We are in session. We're in session as soon as the last speaker left the table, and I think I declared that. Janice?
I actually wanted to talk about something else in relation to the conversation, but this has moved on, but I'll come back to it if you like in a moment when we finish this.
Okay, Janet.
Tom. I presume that is members now finished asking questions of officers, because I didn't want to come in at that stage until people's minds were settled.
No, we ask questions of officers when the presentation's made. Representatives come, and as soon as the last representative's finished, we're in session. All these debates have been in session, and they're assisting members to come to a conclusion on whether or no they want to support the planning application in principle, and how they want to deal with all the specific conditions that they may or may not wish to add to what officers have already included in their professional opinion. It is an appropriate mechanism to allow this planning application principle to be approved.
I'm happy to come in now then. And I mean, I've got sympathy with what the objectors are saying. The difficulty I've got is, in view of the previous history of this site having been granted planning permission, it's difficult to turn it down. Secondly, if we turned it down today and it went to appeal, then some of the conditions we've put in, or any amended conditions we want to put in, wouldn't be taken. I'm particularly heartened by the one at 5.1a about section 75, that we've got some protection there. I think some of the issues raised could be addressed at the detailed stage, because this is only an outline stage. Now, I think it should come back to this committee, and it can be called in. It doesn't just require officers. The local members or any member can call this in and ask it to come back to committee. And obviously, if there's half a dozen objections, it can come back to committee. Because I think we're getting into areas here which we can't define because we're not the detailed plan there. And I think for safety's sake, in order to protect ourselves and protect the residents, you grant the outline today and we can deal with a lot of these issues at the detailed stage. Because I wouldn't want to refuse it today and find that we lose any control we've got over some of the conditions we've got here. Because as I've seen before, reporters quite often are quite lackadaisical when they come to impose conditions and take no account of local concerns.
Thanks, Councillor McCauley. I wouldn't be comfortable in making a decision today based on what a reporter may or may not say if an appellant appeals. That's of no consequence to this committee. We have to make a decision based on what we feel is appropriate, what we feel is right. And if something else happens at a later stage, then so be it. Councillor Dick?
No, I see Councillor McCaughey's point on the fact that we here have the ability to apply conditions which may affect a more detailed application. And I think on that basis, and given the assurances we've been given as far as the effective and in principle application, I'd be satisfied to recommend that with the conditions, and specifically on the drainage issue, which I think Councillor McKee had mentioned, that we word it in such a way that we could look at other options other than the existing burn.
Thanks for that, Councillor Dick. Councillor Geddes?
Can I ask you that? Can I ask Councillor Dick through you then, sir? Is he moving, in fact, that the application be granted on the basis detailed in the report?
Yes.
I would be prepared to second that, sir.
Thank you. So we have a proposal that the application be granted as per the officer's report. Councillor Crothers?
I agree with that entirely, Chair, in regards to I think the detail that we're looking for isn't here, and it'll come at another stage, and whether it comes back to committee, it may or may not. And Councillor Thompson, do you take a niceness to the part that Councillor Thompson brought with the condition 15, I think it was earlier?
Remember, it will not come back to committee if there are more than 6 objectors or if a member calls it in. It's not an automatic visit back to committee, but having taken that decision, I'm satisfied with that. Is there any alternative view, Councillor McKee?
Just for clarity, Chair, is that deleting the reference to the water course to the northwest of the site?
Not yet. The recommendation and seconded was as per the officer's report. So if you have an alternative view, and I wouldn't want to see 100 alternative views, because there is an opportunity for a member to bring this back, irrespective of what the content of the report might be now, when there's a more detailed opinion and a more detailed design made available to officers. Councillor Crothers and Councillor McCall.
I mean, I would support what's being proposed by Councillor Dick and seconded by Councillor Geddes, because it applies to the SEPA regulations, and I would feel safer with that rather than on a kind of ad hoc basis.
Councillor McComb.
Thanks, Chair. I would be inclined to support Councillor McKee's suggestion that reference to the water course to the northwest be deleted. I think it's far simpler just to say the necessary consents to discharge treated water from the site.
Okay, if that's a proposal and a seconder with the AU second, then that's something that we would have to vote on if it's an appropriate proposal. David?
Can I just suggest that if that's the route you're going down, you maybe just amend it to read necessary consents to discharge to a water course, and that's non-specific, which would allow an option to actually bring a pipe to another water course, so it's not necessarily going into that burn. That would probably tie it. So just by saying you can't have it not discharging somewhere, it's obviously got to go somewhere, and you do want that to be a water course. So that would take away the very specific nature of this condition.
That's the point I was trying to get across, Chair. If you identify a site and say that's where they have to go, more or less, and it's no really acceptable to us. So
just to be clear, what we're talking about is condition 12 on page 47. So that the bit that you see in bold near the top of the page would then read, no development shall commence on the site unless and until the developer has satisfied the planning authority that it has secured all the necessary consents to discharge to a water course. And that's all it would say.
Happy with that, Councillor McKee? Councillor Whitson and Councillor Diggle.
Thanks, Chair. I'm minded to go with the amendment, but I would seek comfort from, I don't want to shut down options. I mean, if we're going to change that section and just say discharge to a water course, I was going to actually say that does that close down options? Because, for example, why isn't this development considered linking in with existing sewage systems in the area? Is that out with? I mean,
I think that the advice is it's not an alternative proposal now; it's a solution, so that we simply get the agreement with the alternative water course is something that will have to be brought back to officers, and there will be an opportunity for you and other members to bring it to committee. If you're not satisfied with the solution, you can call this report or this application in at a later date when it becomes a detailed application. Councillor Dick.
So given in fact that's actually widening the options, and my seconder's happy to go with that, I'd be happy to accept that. If that's okay with Councillor Geddes.
Councillor Geddes?
Well, on balance, I'll go with it, sir. I don't see anything particularly wrong with what's been suggested in the body of the condition. But, you know, if in fact that's, you know, the feeling of the majority of members that they want to be a bit less specific, as I say, on balance, I'll support that.
Thank you for that. Members satisfied then. Councillor Diggle?
Would it be appropriate to add to the recommendations that this any detailed application comes to this committee and isn't used by objections or not?
No, it's no practice, so we don't want to be changing what we do as a matter of course. You will have the opportunity, you will be given notification of when a detailed application is submitted, and you or any other member of the council can call that in, and I would think that would be the due process that would apply. If there are no other members and there are no dissenting voices, Paula, can you advise members of the public decision of the committee, please?
The committee has determined to grant the application subject to the conditions set out in the report under amendment of condition 12 to delete the reference to northwest water course and substitute reference to a water course, and to correct the typographical error in condition 15 where not has been omitted.
Thank you. I'll now vacate the chair and ask Vice Chair to take charge of the meeting, please.
Thanks, members. Item 6 is the application to vary condition 6 of planning permission. Condition requiring the installation of infrared light on the wind turbine to allow the installation of a 25 candela omni-directional visible red light retrospective at Upper Ingleston, Moniaive, Case officers Patrick Hannah, can I just hand over to you, Patrick?
Thank you, Chair. Members may recall that planning permission was granted by this committee in October 2012 for a turbine at this site, and that turbine was 34.2 metres in height. A condition was attached to that planning permission requiring the installation of an infrared light. The turbine has instead been installed with a visible red light, and the current application seeks to regularise that position. The turbine is located on a hillside south of Moniaive at the convergence of the two valleys along which runs the A702. In this photograph, taken from the Kirkland to Moniaive Road, you can see the turbine centre. And the arrow points to the hub of the turbine, which is where the visible red light has been installed. And this is a view of the turbine from the closest public road. And you can see the farmhouse stroke guest house on the left-hand side of the turbine, just next to the cluster of trees that's associated with the turbine. For obvious reasons, I haven't taken any photographs at night. They'd be meaningless without any reference points. However, I did visit the site at night time, at dusk night time, and that was in November of last year when the sky was clear and there was very good visibility. And the red light was very visible. It was visible from at least 3 kilometres away. And the light appeared to be incongruous, and it was an unexpected feature within the nighttime rural landscape. As a result, this application is recommended for refusal. The applicant has provided some justification that's set out at paragraph 4.5 of the report for retention of the visible red light, but none of the issues raised are sufficiently compelling to justify an alternative recommendation. Over and above the merits of the application, emerging council practice over recent years has been to require the installation of infrared lights as opposed to visible red lights in visually sensitive areas such as regional scenic areas. Therefore, over and above the merits of the application, it's appropriate that the red light is removed in the interests of consistency. And therefore, the proposal is recommended for refusal.
Thanks, Mr. Hannah. Members, have you got any questions for the case officer first? No? In that case, I'll call the, first of all, Mr. John Plant, who's the representative, and you have 3 minutes, Mr. Plant. If you take a seat and switch your microphone on. And I'll indicate when you have 30 seconds left.
Thank you. I objected to the erection of this turbine in the first place, and unfortunately my objection was not accepted. I did take some consolation in the fact that even though my objection hadn't been accepted, at least I wouldn't be able to see this turbine or where it was in the dark. How wrong can you be? For this time of year, up to 16 hours a day, you see the light, and dependent on which way the blades are facing, that's either a permanent red light or it's a flickering oblique strobe light because of the way the blades pass through that light. And I say that's permanently illuminated for 24 hours a day. About the visibility, your officer says that it's seen it from 3 kilometres away. Using the applicant's own evidence, when he put the turbine up, the zone of theoretical visibility covers an area of some 176 square kilometres in total. The light can be seen in excess of 8 kilometres away. In old money, that's 5 miles. Now, in October 2012, the applicant agreed to put in an infrared light. He actually contacted the council and in writing said he would put an infrared light in, and then totally disregarded the council's decision and put up a cheap option, which is this red light. But this is not the first time he's ignored planning consent. He still hasn't complied with access and visibility requirements relating to the agricultural dwelling that you see on the picture there. And this was highlighted when he came back with a change of use, so ignoring planning seems to be the norm. It's taken a long time to get this to where we are today. I originally complained to the council in July 2013 about this light, and there's been stalling all the way through on this. And it's only the fact that he was issued with an enforcement notice in November that we're actually here today. It was quite clear the original permission, and it was for this type of light. Now, if that was a valid purpose then, it still has to be a valid purpose today.
You have 30 seconds left.
If we don't do anything about it and do allow this, with the number of turbines that are coming into the Moniaive area, you're likely to give a green light to turn in this part of Dumfries and Galloway into a red light area. I urge you to reject this application. Thank you for giving me the time to speak this morning.
Thanks, Mr. Plant. Members, have you any questions for Mr. Plant at this stage? No, thank you.
Thank you.
You may take your seat, and I now ask for Mr. Neil Gourley, the applicant, to approach the seat, and you will have 30 seconds. 3 minutes to. I will indicate when you have 30 seconds left. Okay, Mr. Gourley.
Oh, sorry. Chairman, councillors, thank you for the opportunity to put my case here. If I can just give you a summary of the case. Obviously, when this turbine was being constructed in November 2012, the light issue was something that I had to deal with. I phoned up the council offices for clarification on this, and if you look to the last page of the application, you'll see that the reason for condition 6 is for air safety reasons. So I asked for clarification from the council office. Unfortunately, Mr. Annan was on leave, and so I just got the duty officer that day who had looked at the permission, said this is an air safety issue. Please refer your questions to the MOD. This is what I did. I referred it to the MOD. The MOD said yes, you have an option of infrared lighting, or in our case, or this omni-directional lighting. And our preferred lighting is the omni-directional lighting. I asked the question why this was the preferred lighting, and they said that all civil aviation, particularly fixed-wing aircraft that do fly in the day and at night, do not wear infrared lights, and so this is for the safety of the majority of air users. So, taking the recommendation from the MOD, I went ahead, ordered the light. I actually rephoned the MOD to confirm that the manufacturer, the make, the model of the light that I was going to install on this turbine was correct, and they reaffirmed to me that this was their preferred lighting to be put on this turbine. So that's the case as it stands. So this is put up. I totally understand that what was in the original application was there for infrared lighting only, but so there was a slight misunderstanding between here, but I was rather sent from the planning office to the MOD on the basis that this was an air safety issue. I can assure you that when you have the objector you've just heard about, who has been fairly consistent in his objections to every single application I has put in over the last 5 years, if you look at your papers, you'll see I've had a few applications in for the house that you see and the turbine and various things. He has objected to every single thing I've ever tried to do in the last 4 or 5 years. So I was well aware that I had to make sure that I covered all the bases. There's been no objection here from the Community Council, and in fact, one of the objectors actually for this proposal has objected, thinking that I'm actually going to change the light to another light. So actually, they're thinking that this application is about changing the one that is already there. So there's quite an element of confusion. If I can move on to the night vista, I live and work on the farmland up here at Moniaive. At night time, the whole of the valley is illuminated,
up the three valleys out of Moniaive with a whole radius of lights, of orange lights, of street lighting, of house lighting. You
That's
then
your
come
3
to-
minutes, Mr. Gourley.
Sorry?
That's your 3 minutes.
Okay.
Members, have you any questions for the applicant? Councillor McKee.
Can I ask you, sir, what was your reasoning behind fitting a light different from that as per the planning permission?
Councillor, yes, in answer to that, there was confusion in my part because if you looked at the original planning application, the reasoning on the back page of it was for air safety reasons. And so I had to make sure when I put this light up that actually I had to clarify this with the MOD as to exactly the light that would be required. And if I hadn't been pushed on by the planning office saying this was an air safety issue, I might have actually put the infrared light up. But what's happened here is the fact that the MOD have come back, and they've also come back, if you read your notes from here, saying this is their preferred lighting. They have preferred the lighting which is on that turbine, and I must admit has been in situ now for 14 months.
Any other questions, members? Okay, in that case, you may resume your seat, Mr. Gourley. Thanks very much. Members, any question for the case officer? No? In that case, we're open session. Councillor Geddes.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, so the matters in short compass, I would move, in fact, that the case officer's recommendation be approved and it would refuse this application.
Okay, we have a motion. Councillor Carruthers, and then Councillor McKee, Councillor Thompson.
Just clarity from the case officer, just to make sure that the case officer is absolutely aware of the facts that's been presented in regards to the last representation, that the preferred option from the MOD was to actually have the type of light that's been fitted, and if that is the case, I'd like to get that clarity.
Could you give some clarification on that, please, Mr. Hannett?
Thanks, Chair. Indeed, yes, the MOD do indicate in their consultation response at 2.1 of the report that their preferred lighting type is visible red lighting. However, they specifically go on to say that it is appreciated that for various reasons this is not always practical or appropriate, which is why the MOD also accept infrared lighting. As a result, it therefore comes down to a planning judgment as to whether a red light should be installed or whether the landscape impact of the proposal should be taken into account.
Councillor McKee.
No, that's clarified the point I was wanting to raise.
Thanks. Councillor Thompson.
I'll second Councillor Geddes in going with the recommendations as presented.
Thank you. Councillor Geddes.
Merely to observe, so that at the end of the day, it's this council as planning authority, not the MOD, which decides the conditions in relation to such applications. The interests of air safety are adequately served, with an infrared form of lighting, and that would strengthen my resolve.
Thanks for that. And Councillor McComb.
Thank you. This is a straightforward matter. Infrared lighting is acceptable to the MOD. The planning requirement was for infrared lighting. There has been a disregard of the planning condition. I would support Councillor Geddes' motion.
Okay, if there are no other points, is anyone otherwise minded? Thank you. Paula, could you sum up for me?
Committee has determined to refuse the application on the grounds set out in the report.
Thanks very much. If we could ask the Chairman to return.
Thank you, members. We on to item 7, application to vary condition 2 of planning permission 10/P/3/0228, removal of steel container stores, static caravan, canteen building and steel container office within 3 years to allow continued siting until 31st of March 2018 at Glenloy Forest, High Algarth. The application takes full planning permission and the case officer is Patrick Hanna. Pat, if you take us through the presentation, please.
Thank you, Chair. Planning permission was granted in August 2010 for the change of use of the application site to a shooting ground. This was a permanent permission that was granted. However, by condition, permission was only granted for a temporary period for a number of structures on the site. The application site is highlighted in the location plan on the screen. You can see to the east of the application site the wind turbines associated with Swinton Wind Farm, and down to the southwest you can see the village of Algarth. This is the plan that was submitted in 2010 with the original planning application indicating the indicative siting of the units. And this is a recent photograph of the units. The applicant has provided a brief justification for the continued siting of these units, which is simply that the landowner has confirmed that the lease on the land will not be extended beyond March 2018 due to the fact that there's a proposed wind farm development at the site. Indeed, we do have a current and undetermined planning application for a wind farm at the site, and you can see that on the screen here. And you can also see that it entirely overlaps the application site. Given this uncertainty over the long-term future of the land, the applicant's justification would appear to be reasonable. Refusal of the temporary buildings would make the operation of the shooting ground very difficult. There would be no cover, no storage, no respite for customers. It's quite a remote location. Furthermore, the erection of permanent structures for a temporary period of time would be inappropriate and unsustainable, and therefore the proposal is considered to be acceptable and is recommended for approval.
Thank you, Pat. Do any members have any questions for the case officer? In that case, we have one objector, Mrs. Olive Repton. Olive, if you'd like to come forward, please. Whenever you're ready, Mrs. Repton, and you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
I thought I'd got 5 since it's
No,
a major
that's only for a major application. This is a modest application, and the... Oh, my apologies. It is major. You're absolutely right.
Thank you.
So you have 5 minutes. My apologies.
I've got 5 now.
You have indeed.
Thank you. In his delegated report of 2010, the same case officer, Pat Hanna, said it is inappropriate to allow permanent permission for temporary buildings such as the proposed porta cabins. The applicant has indicated these are temporary structures. Well, there have been 2 temporary grants of permission for these containers starting in June 2009, a period of over 4.5 years already. A third term for an extra 4 years is unacceptable and far too long for another temporary permission. This would amount to 9.5 years of temporary permissions. The time-limited condition was to allow time to plan, obtain planning permission and construct permanent buildings suitable for the open countryside. There has been no sign of any planning application for this over the last 4.5 years. The possible termination of the lease is not backed up with any letter from the landowner or copy of any lease. The applicant uses the term intimated. This land has a permanent change of use to a shooting ground, and an application for a continuation of the temporary containers should have been submitted before the end of the time period. This was received by the Planning Office after the end of the permission. So the shooting ground has gained another 5 months' use without permission while the application is being processed and determined. The enforcement officer reminded Mr. Coates in July that his temporary permission for the containers was about to end. The leaseholder of the site and applicant for this planning application, Mr. and Mrs. Coates, appear to now sublet the shooting ground to David Collins, running it as Aldgirth Shooting Ground as registered with the Scottish Clay Pigeon Target Association. The renewable energy project referred to is Blackwood Wind Farm that should be determined soon, as all the consultations are now complete, with the landscape architect submitting her report on the 14th of January. There are objections on the planning side from the MOD, NAT and the landscape architect. Perhaps as a compromise, the permission you are looking at today should be reduced in time from March 2018 to March 2015, when all the relevant factors should be clear. Councillors should also be aware that other conditions of the permission have not been adhered to. No passing places have been constructed on the public road to Low Aldgirth. Shooting times have not been sent to neighbours or displayed on the notice boards as required in the traffic management plan. Please, can I ask the councillors today to consider the proximity of the core path to this development. The containers mean more activity up there all the time, and for people walking or riding there, this is unacceptable also. The containers are not a suitable addition to the countryside, hence the reason temporary permission was granted, and I request that councillors refuse this permission or at least reduce the time to March 2015. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Repton. Does any member have any question for Mrs. Repton? In that case, thank you very much for your presentation. You'd like to go back to your seat. Okay, members, we're now in session. One thing Mrs. Repton did say was about the shooting ground, and that's not up for determination today. The shooting can continue whether or no this application is refused. This is simply about the siting of the porta cabins. Councillor McCaughey?
Just a question. I mean, the mentions here about a wind farm application. What's that got to do with it?
It's the justification for continuation, because the wind farm application, if determined favourably, would put a death knell on any long-term usage of the site. But you're quite right, it's from information only. It's absolutely nothing to do with the planning application.
Why would a wind farm stop anybody shooting?
The indication we have from the applicant is that his lease is being terminated, and that the reason for the termination of the lease is the construction or proposed construction of a wind farm that Mrs. Repton's quite right hasn't been determined yet. And there is no indication that the lease will even be terminated because there's no legal document to support that. What we are dealing with is the application before us, which is a 3-year extension on the grounds that are laid out in the report. Councillor McCaughey?
No, I disagree there. The lease has not been terminated because of a wind farm. It states quite clear on the report, the lease runs to 2018 regardless of whether there's a wind farm there or not. Right, now this wind farm thing seems to be a red herring that's been introduced. We haven't seen any site of a wind farm. I don't see why a wind farm can preclude anybody from shooting.
I'm not inclined to disagree with you. I'm telling you that's what the report says, and that's the justification for it. And if you're not happy to accept that, then that is a matter for you as a member of the committee. Councillor Geddes.
No. As far as I'm concerned, Chairman, again, the matter, at least to my mind, is straightforward. With all due deference to Mrs. Repton, redoubtable lady as she is, my view is that it would be unreasonable to restrict it to March 2015, as is being suggested. And on the contrary, I would suggest, in fact, that we adopt the case officer's recommendation and approve the application, subject to the conditions detailed at the conclusion of the report, sir.
Thanks for that, Councillor Geddes. Councillor Dick and then Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Chair. I did note in the case officer's recommendation that it was on or before 31st of March, and I was willing to listen to anyone else on that matter, but I'm inclined to support Councillor Geddes on that matter.
Thanks for that, Councillor Dick. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. It was just about the timings and the years, etc. So it's just to get a bit of an understanding. Has the current permission for the temporary structures expired, or is it due to expire? And if so, given that this is 2014, if we're adding 3 years, would it not be 2017 that it would expire? Just really to get the numbers right. Thank you.
Okay, Pat, would you like to answer that, please?
Thanks, Chair. The condition required that the units move in, just bear with me one moment. Within 3 years from the date of the original permission. And that original permission was granted in August 2010. So in August, the permission for the siting of the units expired, for want of a better word. At that time, this application was submitted to regularise that position and to allow the continued siting of it. This application is not seeking for the siting of the units for a number of years, but until a specific point in time.
I think if anything that's muddied the water, we can't backdate the application, but 3 years from now, isn't it 2018? And I think Stephen's asking why we're saying 2018, because it does specifically say for 3 years.
The application itself is to vary condition 2 of the original planning permission, which required the removal of the units within 3 years. And this application is to allow continued siting until March 2018. So there's a change in emphasis on the original application was for a specific defined period of 3 years. This is to allow siting until a particular date.
Thanks for that clarification. That's fine. Councillor Crothers and then Councillor Blake.
Thanks, Chair. I would support what Councillor Geddes put forward earlier, but just a point of clarity in regards to, Mr. Repton said that after 9.5 years, come 2017, another 6 months would take it to the 10-year timeline. What effect would that have on a deemed approval? I think you could say, can it be in use for 10 years? Something's been in use for 10 years. I think there's an acceptance that would be a permission granted.
David?
It's only if something has been in continuous use for more than 10 years without planning permission that it can become unauthorised, but obviously this has got planning permission and it only expired in August last year. We've got the current application to determine, so that rule wouldn't actually kick into play.
Okay, if Councillor Blake, Councillor McCaughey and then Councillor Ogilvie.
I would like to ask if David could possibly give a definition to what is reasonably considered to be temporary permission. I mean, 9.5 years does seem to be excessive. And a second part to that should be reminded, could we reduce the number of years? Would it be appropriate to do that?
David?
Certainly, you would not, the best practice advice is not to continually grant temporary permissions. The reason for the original temporary permission for these was to allow the developer to get a business off the ground that was viable and actually put in permanent buildings, because I mean, if Pat can go back to the slides, you can see that they're really not a proper permanent. Thank you. It shows that they're not a permanent, well-designed structure which you would want to see there in perpetuity. I think it's fair to say, had this been an application just for a further retention of the temporary buildings and there was no end in sight, we would have probably recommended refusal, because clearly what we were trying to do is bring it to a head. The only reason that we have shown sympathy towards this one is because we have been informed, as is stated in the report, the applicant has submitted a brief justification for the continued siting. This states that the lease of the land is due to expire in March 2018, and the landowner has intimated that this will not be extended. So on that basis, we think it would be unreasonable to not extend it for a further period, and it certainly would be unreasonable to require permanent buildings now to go in, knowing that these permanent buildings would have to come out in March 2018. You don't want to predetermine any future application, but let's simply say that we would be unsympathetic to a continued use of these buildings on site beyond this. So in the event that an application were to come in for a further extension and the lease had been extended, I think that is the point at which we'd say, no, that certainly is clearly enough. Don't think there's really anything else to add at the moment. Yeah.
Thanks for that, David. And that's useful that another application could come forward, but at least at the moment, officers are saying that's not something they'd have a particular sympathy with. Have Councillor McCaughton and then Councillor Ogilvie.
I'm minded to refuse this one because I think we're being taken for a ride here. The lease expires in 2018. Applicants know that all along, even at the time of the original application. They probably never had any intention of developing this piece of land whatsoever. So I'm not very happy about the way we are being treated as a planning authority. The land itself is permission for shooting. That's contained within the report. So he's now had nearly 4 years of temporary accommodation. We show no signs of complying with the condition, and whether his lease up in 2018 or not, that's his tough chucks. He knew that for day one, and I think it should be, we should refuse this and should have to adhere to the original permission.
Councillor Ogilvie.
A lot's been, and even in the report, about the lease stopping in 2018, but it's not been confirmed. It's alluded to only. I just wondered if we could get that confirmed to strengthen our decision.
I would suggest no, because it's not contained within the report. But what the officers are saying is that should another application come forward for continued temporary siting, that would not be sympathetically considered. And if a planning application were to be brought forward for a permanent structures, that would then come to members as an alternative proposal. So I don't think there's any need for that, although I'm grateful for you to bring that point to members. I've got Councillor Thompson and Councillor McKee.
Thank you, Chair. It seems to be from previous permissions that there's a condition limited to 3 years, and I would feel more comfortable if we had some kind of consistency rather than a kind of, well, we'll determine it by when the lease expires, whenever that might be. So, I mean, I don't know what the will of other members is, but I think 3 years would be more than enough time to then submit another application should it be needed. Thank you.
Okay, we'll come to all the different options at the end of the members' debate. I've got Councillor McKean.
Thanks, Chair. It's this issue of the lease. I don't think our officers have actually seen the lease. And if we want to grant permission, and I'm quite happy going down that road, but could we put in subject to the site of the lease? In other words, if the lease doesn't run to 2018, the planning permission doesn't run to then either. But as I say, it appears that we've never seen the lease and we're taking somebody's word for it. And this is another extension. This is going to be 10 years these tin sharks have been on site.
Well, what we're being told is that that's not really relevant today because they have permanent permission to shoot on that site. So that's a given. They could bring in temporary trailers and work out of them if they removed any porta cabins tomorrow. The shooting would still go on. What we're being told by officers is that all things considered, their professional opinion and advice to members is it's reasonable to allow this for another 3 years with the comfort and the knowledge that officers would not be happy to consider another extension beyond 2018. But I'm in members' hands, absolutely. I've got Councillor Carruthers and then Councillor Geddes again. And currently we have one proposal on the table and 2 potential alternatives to that.
Still minding the same, Chair, but just my understanding of the wind farm thing is that if there was a permission granted, the likelihood is that the landowners would stop the lease in regards to, because they have a different income. So I'm only putting my perspective on it. They would have an income suffice to take away the shooting rights on that. So I mean, that's just my understanding of it.
Aye, I think what we don't want to do is speculate. What we have is an application with officers' advice on how to deal with that, and I'm in members' hands whether they're happy to do that or not. Councillor Geddes.
As you've already said, sir, with the greatest of deference to colleagues, I mean, the issue of the duration of the lease, strictly speaking, is irrelevant. For all I know, for all you know, there may be a clause in the lease which says, in fact, that it's terminable, in 6 months' notice been given. So we perhaps come to a decision today, and any one of the 3 alternatives that's tabled, and for all we know, the lease might be terminated in 6 months' time. De facto, that means, of course, that the applicant wouldn't have access to the land, and therefore his planning consent, purported to run on to whatever period we agree today, would be of no use and no validity. So, on that basis, I've already moved, sir, that we adopt the recommendations contained in Patrick's report.
In that case, we have a firm proposal now. We have a suggestion from Councillor McCaughey that he might wish to put up a proposal to refuse. We've one from Councillor Thompson saying that he would consider a 3-year extension only. Councillor McCaughey first, do you have an alternative proposal to the one being put forward by
I'm just merely,
members?
I would move that we refuse it. They've had their temporary permission for 3 years, and I've refused this attempt to vary it.
Does Councillor McCaughey have a second, or Councillor Blake?
Yeah, I'm quite happy to second that.
Councillor Thompson, do you have an alternative proposal on the suggestion you made that you might wish to have a 3-year term only rather than a specific date, 2018? Okay, in that case, we have...
I'm very sorry to jump in, Councillor McCaughey. I actually need a reason for refusal from you.
It's just that it's application to vary the condition. I'm not prepared to vary the condition, therefore refuse it. That's a simple reason for refusal. They're asking for an application to vary the condition. I'm saying we don't vary the condition.
But again, you've got to give a reason for it. I would suggest that the comments I made earlier actually give you your hook, that the siting design materials of the buildings is not such to justify a further retention for a longer period. Choose that if you wish to use as ground.
Happy to tag that on, yes.
Okay, when Paul has finished taking our notes, I'll ask Paula just to remind members what the motion and amendment is, and then ask her to proceed to the vote.
The motion proposed by Councillor Geddes, seconded by Councillor Dick, is to approve the application as per the report. The amendment proposed by Councillor McCaughey, seconded by Councillor Blake, is to refuse on the basis that the siting and design and materials of the temporary units are not of sufficient quality, standard, to justify retention for a further period. Chair.
Motion.
Councillor Dick. Councillor...
Motion.
Thank you. Councillor Blake.
Amendment.
Councillor Carruthers.
Motion.
Councillor Diggle. Councillor Dryborough.
Abstain.
Councillor Geddes.
Motion.
Councillor Groom.
Motion.
Councillor McCaughey.
Amendment.
Councillor McComb.
Motion.
Councillor McKee.
Motion.
Councillor Ogilvie.
Amendment.
Councillor Thompson.
Amendment.
Councillor Witts.
Amendment.
Nine five. Yeah, 8-5 and 1 amendment. So that's 8 votes for the motion, 5 votes for the amendment with 1 abstention. The motion is carried. The Planning Committee is determined to approve the application as per the report.
Councillor McCaughey.
Could I just say, Chair, there was something mentioned by Mrs Repton during her submission about other conditions that had been breached could the planners ensure that these are checked on to make sure that they are complied with? We've only given permission for this particular thing. We've not given permission to breach other conditions. So could Mrs Repton's complaints be investigated as well?
I'll see that that's done. Okay. Okay, members, do you want a half-hour comfort break? Okay. In that case, we'll return at 1:05. Okay, turn our attention to item 8, removal of planning conditions 19 relating to trading hours and 24 relating to noise levels of planning permission 93/P/1/0149 and condition 1 relating to delivery times planning permission 11/P/1/0354 at Morrison's, London Road, Stranraer. This application for full planning permission, and the case officer is Peter Barker. Can you take us through your presentation, Peter, please?
Thank you, Chair. Excuse me. I'll just take you briefly through the sort of site and surroundings, and I'll just highlight one or two aspects in the report, if I may. The Morrison store in Stranraer, it's been open for about 20 years now. Most of you familiar with Stranraer will know its location and whereabouts. Just to refresh your memory, this is the front elevation, the main public aspect facing London Road, or the A75 as it comes into Stranraer. Along the right-hand side, or the east side of the supermarket, is the way into the rear service yard, which doubles up as access to some of the parking bays and parking access roads. Just swinging the camera slightly to the right, just to give you a feel of the surroundings. The car parking area, which goes onto the service yard just out and to the left of the picture, is surrounded by a pretty high wall. It varies between about 2.5 and 3 meters high in some places. And just to show that there are dwellings on the other side of the wall there, which front onto a road called Royal Avenue. This is the way into the service yard at the end of the sort of parking bay area, and at the sort of far northeastern corner of the supermarket premises. You'll see that it's sort of entered and secured by some large sliding palisade gates. Just to sort of give you a feel for the kit and equipment that's there, so that as and when I develop the argument, you'll see that noise is an issue. So the opening and closing of gates could be an issue in terms of nighttime operations. Just poking the camera through the grill of the gate, you can see into the service yard there. As you can see, it's all concreted, fairly hard and featureless, and bounded by the screen wall which I referred to earlier. At the white building at the back is the rear annex hotel rooms to the Northwest Castle Hotel, and and the little ridge roof, sort of slightly greeny brown coloured ridge roof, just peeking over the wall on the left-hand side is the curling ring annex to the hotel again. And the dwellings off to the right of the hotel front onto Royal Crescent, which ultimately faces the seafront. Just swinging the camera slightly to the right again, you'll just see the houses continuing, and the wall off to the right, extending down the right-hand margin of the picture, is again the backs of the houses to Royal Avenue. These are the store opening hours as operating at the moment. You'll see from the report that actually, even though the variation to open the store hours, or to vary the store opening hours, was actually made part of this application, it was done so inadvertently and acknowledged by the applicants as a matter which had been considered before. So even though the store opening hours as chosen by Morrison's are what you see in front of you, the store does actually have the ability to open 24 hours and 24 hours a day and 7 days each week. just to draw your attention to some of the points in the report. As I said, just in 1.7, the opening hours are potentially 24 hours. Paragraph 1.8, the existing delivery arrangements, even though attempts have been made to alter them in the past, they still are more or less as originally conditioned, and they're basically restricted to the sociable hours Mondays to Saturdays and on Sunday mornings. The crux of the proposal is that the Morrisons are obviously, given that this is about the third or fourth attempt that they've made to actually vary the hours of delivery, it's something that's obviously concerning them, and something that, and the Stranraer operations, obviously, with being an outpost, I suspect it's actually causing them difficulties in actually how they run and operate their delivery system. And they've approached us again to see if we can relax our stipulation so that deliveries can actually take place overnight. Now, they've come across the same issue at other local authorities, and other local authorities have generally taken the same sort of stance up until now, but the difference now is that the company have actually sat down hard and to think about how they can overcome the objections which have been previously put in their way. And what they've come up with is what they call a quiet delivery scheme, which really sort of looks at the practices of and in detail the aspects of how a delivery is undertaken potentially, and at night how those aspects of the emotions of a delivery can actually be made quieter. And other local authorities have actually given Morrisons a 12-month trial just to see how those how that regime can actually take place, and if it is successful or not. That's really where the report concludes, insofar as the onus very much rests on the developer or the operator to actually demonstrate to the council and to local residents that deliveries at night can actually be conducted in an acceptable way, a way that doesn't actually cause loss of amenity to the local residents. They're quietly confident that the nighttime delivery scheme will actually work. And certainly the feedback we're getting from the other authorities is that so far, so good. So what I've done is we've recommended a 12-month trial period to actually give the operator the opportunity to demonstrate that they can effectively pull it off. If they don't, if they blow the chance, then clearly permission will, if permission is granted today, it'll lapse and the original hours will be reverted to. So, as I said, the onus is very much on the applicants to actually demonstrate willing. One aspect of that of the nighttime delivery operation, which some of the objectors brought to our attention, was the effect of illumination in the service yard when deliveries would potentially be taking place. So, as an extra means of control, what we're suggesting is that a scheme of illumination be agreed with council prior to the use taking place. So as essentially the whole yard isn't floodlit all night in the expectation of a lorry turning up. Effectively, the yard will only be illuminated when the lorry is there. And another aspect is, which the other authorities in Scotland where this trial is taking place, is that Morrisons have volunteered a local working party forum be set up, so that the company, the council, and local residents that are interested can actually sit round the table and to discuss any issues and problems that arise over the 12-month period, so that if anything does arise, it could be nipped in the bud and hopefully the scheme and the arrangements tweaked so that by the end of the 12-month period at least, that hopefully a satisfactory scheme that satisfies all parties can be satisfactorily and fully worked out. I think that's probably all I need to say at the moment. I'd add that there's a representative of the company, the company's agent here, who you may wish to ask questions of regarding some of the finer details of the quiet nighttime delivery scheme. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Peter. So we are questions for officers, and I've got Councillor McCaughey.
Yeah. I mean, nowhere in your presentation or in this report or in the recommendations can I find what the applicant's actually asking for. I've got a set of recommendations there saying we grant permission for a temporary period. But and I can't find it in the application. What are they asking for? I've a whole load of blurb there about previous applications and what were granted, but I can't find in this report what are they asking for in terms of opening hours and what they're asking in terms of noise restrictions. There's nothing in your report about that.
Peter? Right, if I can clarify. As I said, in terms of opening hours of the store, those are already fully approved as to...
I'm not talking about the store, I'm talking this delivery thing.
Yeah.
You've got recommendations here, so what are you asking us to agree?
I think the planning officer's coming to that. Give him a chance to finish.
The second part was is essentially that the applicants are asking for a relaxation in delivery times so that deliveries can take place 24/7. And also that the noise condition, which restricts the control that restricts noise during delivery times, is actually relaxed as well, so that deliveries can take place in accordance with the quiet nighttime delivery scheme.
Yeah, I mean, I accept that, but what isn't clear in your report, and it's certainly not clear in the recommendations, is that this is for 24-hour-a-day operation, 7 days a week. I can't find a reference to that in the report or the recommendations. It talks a lot about varying the existing conditions and a whole list of previous planning applications that we turned down. But there's nowhere in this report that tells me that's what they want 24/7, and that's certainly not contained in the recommendations. You've got a set of recommendations there that didn't make sense.
I think what we're being told is the removal of planning conditions 19 and condition 1 relating to delivery times is what they're being asked for. That is what you're being asked to do, remove them. And by removing them, it makes it a 24-hour operation. So although it isn't maybe implicit in the text, it is in the application. But I'll ask David just to confirm that.
But can I suggest, it's not so much for our elucidation, because we're all sat around the table here, but any member of the public getting into the library and reading this report, or indeed, if we make a decision and looking at these recommendations, no member of the public will be able to make sense of what these recommendations are. It's not acceptable.
I will leave it to David to deal with that particular aspect of your inquiry, and I'll ask him just to explain fully what the implications are if we approve this request today.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, and certainly, to be succinct, we have to give a title that doesn't give the full details. It certainly gives the reference number and the condition and a summary of what that condition is relating to. And on page 68, you've got a clear expansion of what each of those conditions actually means. Unusually, at this stage, I've actually got a question for Peter. Just from what you said earlier on, I hadn't quite clocked this, that the relaxation of trading hours has already been granted, so therefore, is the description wrong that we shouldn't be looking at condition 19? Because that's already, it's superfluous.
Probably strictly speaking, yes, but it actually, we actually took the view that it actually, that there's no harm in actually keeping it in there.
But if it's been granted already, we shouldn't be granting it again. That's the point I'm getting at. So I would suggest for clarity for members that really, if you look at paragraph 1.12, it's been clarified that they have 24-hour trading, in which case, really, that's a superfluous application to condition 19. It's really to do with 24 and also condition 1 of the 2011 one. So if that helps a little bit, then really that condition 19, or the trading hours, that should come out of the description, because we shouldn't really be issuing planning permission for something that's already been implemented and received.
Thanks for that, David. If members have any concern about this and you're not satisfied with how the text laid out, we can defer it for a month, but it would be better, I think, maybe if we determined it today. Councillor Geddes and then Councillor Dryborough.
Well, my question to the case officer, or to our planning staff, sir, would be that, without wishing, Chair, let me stress that, to anticipate in any way the decision we may arrive at today, or indeed any future decision, the quiet delivery scheme then, if it were to be implemented, albeit subject to the recommendations for a period of 12 months in the first instance, that would, at some future time, if it was felt appropriate, that would carry over, and this would be an ongoing fixture. I presume that these quiet delivery schemes operate in such fashion elsewhere in relation to Morrison's premises. In other words, the quiet delivery scheme would not only be, wouldn't be for the period of 12 months in the first, would not only be for the period of 12 months in the first instance, but would operate in relation to any future such consent being granted post the 12-month period.
I think the intention is that that is a scheme that will be put in place, and it will manage for the extent of the delivery. If it goes beyond the 12 months, becomes a permanent arrangement, that the delivery scheme would be a permanent arrangement as well. I think Peter already said you might want just to clarify that with the applicant's agent when you get the opportunity, because there are certain elements of the delivery scheme that call into question how indeed that would be managed if it was introduced. But I'll ask Peter just to confirm that for you.
Yes, that's correct. I mean, if as and when the 12-month comes up, I would expect the applicants to be making a further application to either extend the period or to make it permanent. At which time, if the matter eventually comes back to members, the whole issue can be discussed again.
And I would presume we could attach a condition anyway that if it were to be granted on a permanent basis, that we would expect this particular arrangement to be made permanent as well.
No. Basically, condition 1 is giving only 12 months to this. They would need to apply again, and at that time, if the scheme is proven to be successful, then yes, we would certainly want to attach that at that stage.
That's what I was trying to say, aye. Councillor Dryborough and Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. I think the majority of my question was answered when Councillor Geddes asked it, but I'm looking at the conditions and how enforceable they actually are. I mean, under condition 2, you've got including establishing a working group between applicants, council and residents. If residents don't want to be there, they don't have to be there. But who would it be, for instance, from the council that would be involved in the establishment of this particular condition?
David?
I would expect the most relevant people would be planning case officers and probably environmental health officers as well.
Thanks, Councillor Dryborough. Councillor Thompson?
Thank you. It's also in condition 2, just the noise monitoring scheme. I take it that would take place within current delivery hours and would be successfully concluded along with the establishment of the working group before then being submitted and approved and written to the planning authority to then get the 12-month period. I'm just not sure of the timeline there in terms of, so you'd carry out a noise monitoring scheme first within the delivery hours, and then once that was successfully assessed, that would then allow you to meet that condition. No deliveries within extended time period shall take place unless and until all this has been done. So is that before the 12 months kicks in, or does the 12 months allow? I'm just not clear on that.
Let Peter address that.
Thanks, Chair. If I could respond on that issue, the intention is to get them to outline the terms of their quiet delivery scheme, what it is they're bringing forward, have that submitted to us to cover all of the things that are there, and then use that as a basis for monitoring the noise that will occur during the 12-month period, because obviously at the end of the 12-month period, the key thing is to ascertain if it's caused any disturbance or adverse noise to residents, because that's the ultimate, test, if you like, together with the light nuisance as to whether or not it's been a success or a failure. So really the conditions geared up to trying to get a scheme in place that the council can sign up to, and we can then discharge that condition at that stage, so to act as the basis of the 12-month monitoring.
Okay, so, and that would all be within the current delivery hours, if I'm reading it correctly.
It would cover the delivery hours that they intend, which is basically, you know, unrestricted delivery times, if you like, during the 24-hour period, 7 days of the week. So it would have to cover that period of time when deliveries were taking place, yes.
But not out with, as in not within the extended delivery periods as suggested. I think that's what we're...
Just to make it clear, what this condition is seeking is that they can't start the extended time period, which would be open-ended, unless they've submitted the scheme to us, which will set out the working group and how they're going to conduct the noise monitoring. So they have to submit all that to us before they start. But obviously you can't implement the noise working scheme before they've actually carried out the... can't implement the noise monitoring scheme unless they've moved it to the extended working. What this is requiring, the trigger is that they can't start anything until they've submitted the scheme, and the scheme's been approved, but the scheme will set out how they're going to be doing that during the 12-month period, rather than they have to do it all before they actually start, if you see what I mean.
Stephen?
Just to quickly come back, I think then it's just the wording and the conducting of are satisfactory, so that suggests it's already been done. But what I'm understanding is you're saying, and the commencing of an agreed noise monitoring scheme, because one suggests it should have been done prior to that condition being satisfied.
David?
Yes, I see what you're getting at. That's clearly not the intention. I think the intention of the wording is that they've got to submit the quiet delivery scheme, which will be showing how they're going to be establishing the group and so on. But it's, to be honest, rather pointless to be doing the noise monitoring during the existing hours. What you want to do is get the details submitted once that is operational, but this is to establish how we do it. If it helps, we can probably reword that slightly to try and make that clearer. But that was clearly the intention, is the scheme to be submitted, which shall include that.
I would hope that would be useful, because I don't see how we can interfere with what's already agreed by a noise monitoring arrangement. We should be looking at monitoring whatever has been proposed as an exception to what's already approved and has been operational for a considerable period of time. I've got Councillor McCaughey and Councillor Dryburgh again.
Just a couple of tidying up exercises. I think in recommendation 1, permission is hereby granted for 24-hour deliveries only for a temporary period. I think you've got to qualify what you're granting. You know, if a member of the public was to read that recommendation, you should make it clear that that is what it is. It's 24-hour deliveries that we're talking about. And in item 2, the establishment of a working group between applicants, council and residents. Now, if you use the word residents, you're implying somebody that stays in the area, whereas one of the objectors is actually the biggest hotel in the Stranraer area, the Northwest Castle. Now, nobody resident there apart from guests. So I think you've got to change the wording that allows them to be a member of that panel, because it's their business that would be most affected if there was continual noise. So whether you call it neighbouring owner, property owners, whatever else, but I think there's going to be provision there for the Northwest Castle and any other, like, I don't know, I think there might be 1 or 2 guest houses in that area as well. But obviously they maybe have somebody permanent residing there.
You wouldn't want to be prescriptive to living locally, because a community council member might want to have an interest. You want to make sure that it's people who have a specific interest in the welfare of the residents per se. Well, I think you can make it open. I mean, you can include it says the council, now that can be council officers. We want to include the community council to ensure that the wider community, which has got a right to object to planning objections, that's maybe not a bad thing. I've got Councillor Dryburgh and Councillor Geddes.
Just coming back to the previous point on the satisfactory noise monitoring scheme that Councillor Thompson brought up. If I put it in layman's terms, David, you've got to find out the problem first before you put the mitigation in place. Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
Appears the answer is yes to that. Alistair.
Thanks, Chair. Just to observe that, regrettably, Stranraer does not, second biggest town in the region, does not, in fact, have a community council at this moment in time.
Thanks for that information. Okay, I'm sure David will find a suitable form of words before we come to the exact conditions that are to be applied if we approve this. Councillor Macomb.
Thanks, Chair. Presumably the noise monitoring scheme does not establish from the outset the parameters of acceptable noise levels? Do you monitor the noise and then decide afterwards, is that acceptable?
David?
Yes, basically what that would be doing is monitoring the ongoing level of noise during the trial period. That would establish whether or not there is a statutory noise nuisance, whether there is even a level of nuisance that would concern environmental health officers, even if it isn't statutory. But yes, it's the monitoring process during the trial period that we're looking at here.
That's right, Councillor McCormack. Okay. Any other member questions for Officer Stephen?
Just again tidying up. So perhaps, and the agreement of a satisfactory noise monitoring scheme, which could then be approved and then carried out during the trial period.
David, I was kind of hoping that David would come up with formal words later in the
I
process,
will do.
provided we are minded to approve this, of course.
Yeah. Yes, I mean, basically it goes on that if you take the bit that's in parenthesis out, it would read that you've got to not do any deliveries unless the quiet delivery scheme has been submitted to and approved in writing by the planning authority. That maybe is the simpler way of doing it, and then go on to expand on it and saying such scheme shall include. And I'll work on that while everybody else is speaking.
Are there any other questions for planning officers? Okay. It's a good question. Okay. In that case, we now have the applicant's agent, Mr. Peter Karras or Karras. Agent, you'd like to come forward, please. And as it's a local application, you'll be allowed 3 minutes, and I'll remind you 30 seconds before the end of your presentation when to try and sum up. Thank you. Just whenever you're ready.
Thanks very much, committee, for letting me speak today. I don't really intend to speak, and I certainly won't be using the full 3 minutes. I was really here just to help clarify and answer any questions that might come up, because as Peter set out at the outset, this is an important proposal for Morrison's. It has been looked at in the past, and we have now come up with what we think is a good mechanism to allow this to go forward, and Morrison's fully support the recommendation to grant permission, and it is in their interest to make sure that the permission is implemented over the 12-month period to everyone's satisfaction. If I could just clarify as well a little bit about Morrison's. They do have permission to trade 24 hours, but they don't. It's not the Morrison's business model at all. So I'm their planning consultant. We act for Morrison's across all of Scotland, and note there are no stores in Scotland that I'm aware of, and certainly I don't think even in the UK where Morrison's operate on a 24-hour basis. So the operating hours that are there at the moment is fairly standard across Scotland and probably the wider UK, and that would be their intention to continue with those hours. In terms of the delivery model, the challenge they have at the moment is that the current delivery time only allows a truck to arrive about half an hour before the store opens. That doesn't give them time to unload the truck and get the goods onto the shops. They then have an operational issue where they have customers arriving whilst they're still trying to put the products onto the shelves. What they want to do is just have the ability to have that first truck in the morning just coming slightly earlier to allow it to unload and have the goods on the shelf. That process takes a maximum of 90 minutes. So from the truck arriving, 45 minutes to unload, and about the same again to put it onto the shelves. That's all they're looking for. The permission would allow them to have 24-hour deliveries, but they wouldn't be, they wouldn't be using that full 24-hour window for deliveries. It wouldn't also lead to any more deliveries. It's just the current number of trucks would just arrive over a slightly longer period. I don't think I really wanted to say a huge amount else. Hopefully that's just clarified some of the points that I've picked up certainly so far, but I am happy to answer any more questions.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Karras. I have a couple of members, Alistair Witts and then Ash Stryber.
Thank you, Chair. We've already referred to the monitoring regimes carried out in other places where this scheme has been adopted. I'd like to know about the timescale here. I mean, how long have these schemes been going in other areas, and I suppose you need to have a certain length of time before you can judge whether it's been a success or not. And so, could you maybe give us some indication of how it has gone in other areas?
Yeah, that's fine. We've been involved working with Morrison's on this particular initiative to look at the existing conditions for a while. When we submitted this application, we did it around about the same time that we're doing a number of other stores. So they're all at various stages. There's one in Hoyk at the moment, which has just been gone through this stage a couple of months ago, and we've now just started. We've just had the final QDS, sort of quiet delivery scheme, submitted to the council, and we're just about to start that. So they're at various stages. Some are still in planning as well, but we are doing this. In our planning statement, we did refer to one example in another store, and that had a trial period, and they had a working group there, and we're keen just to. I mean, it was successful. I think that some issues were identified, but they were able to identify exactly where the key pinch points were from noise, and they could quickly identify those and make sure that drivers were aware of what they were doing, and if they weren't, or if they could be doing more to minimise any noise. And then the noise is monitored, throughout the trial period as well. And I think that gives an effective way of tracking and monitoring, rather than just trying to predict what it might be. It's just that you get a real life situation, so you can actually monitor it as it happens.
Councillor Witts again.
So are they all fairly recent, are you saying, from that? Some been on the go longer than others, but all it's a fairly new scheme, you're saying?
Yeah, I think that's fair. Certainly in terms of the ones I've been involved with in Scotland, we don't act for Morrison's elsewhere. I know that Morrison's have been doing this nationwide, Scotland, England and elsewhere. But certainly in terms of the ones I've been involved with, they are all at a fairly similar stage. The one in Hoyk is probably the most advanced in terms of having this specific type of model, and we've got exactly the same arrangement there. We've got a 1-year trial period. We've got a similar quiet delivery system in place, and there's a working group with environmental health officers, the planning officer, myself. Morrison's has an acoustic consultant instructed to connect, so they are professionally employed to take forward the noise monitoring, and then so we're going to see how that goes.
Thanks, Councillor Witts. Councillor Dryborough.
Thanks very much, Chair. I'm pretty happy with the response that the officers have given, but just to perhaps expand a little bit on the actual scheme that you're looking for. Obviously, one of the issues that we have in this area is employment. I'm just wondering if there is any increase in employment because of this extension, or should I say this plan. And obviously, Morrison's are now looking at delivery schemes as well for shopping like Tesco's and Asda and people like that. And I'm just wondering if there's any intention for increased workforce there.
I don't think so, but I could certainly ask the question and come back if there's any mechanism to do that. But I think Morrison's is established, and I think the numbers sort of vary. But I think a store here could be sort of a couple of hundred people anyway. But I think what I don't think it will lead to any direct new employment opportunities, but it does mean that it can sustain the business model that they've got at the moment.
Thanks for that. Councillor Blake.
Thank you, Chairman. I think during your presentation, you mentioned that Morrison's did not have the intention of doing 24-hour deliveries, and that you would merely be looking for extending theirs by 90 minutes or so. Could you, Morrison's considered making the application for a variation in these conditions rather than a removal of the conditions?
Well, I think what this application does, and I think there was some confusion about the description, but what this application is made under a provision of the Act which allows you to apply to not comply with the condition, and then what that allows you to do is then either remove the condition altogether or impose an alternative condition in its place. So it could be imposed with new hours if necessary. And we didn't, the basis of the application is to allow that flexibility, so that if we were so prescriptive in the description of development to put those hours in, it's either that or nothing, in our view. So that's why we applied on the basis that we applied, to just not comply with the condition, which is our understanding of how you interpret the mechanism for amending conditions. That gives you that flexibility to either delete it completely or impose an alternative, either a 12-month trial basis or alternative wording. And that's why there's perhaps a bit of confusion about the description.
Thanks for that response. I'm going to ask David just to clarify where we are, because as far as I understand from the application is to remove the condition. The application is not to vary it. So, David, can you maybe respond to that particular inquiry, please?
Yes, it's my understanding this is using section 42 of the Act to effectively remove the condition, and that's what's been applied for and being considered. It is open to the planning authority, as was mentioned there, to actually vary that, but obviously what's the critical thing that's being applied for really here is the removal of it's not compliance with it. So effectively you're giving the variation to allow the 24 hours to go on. It might not happen in practice that it's all 24 hours going on. That during the deliveries it probably would be much restricted, but this is to give you the flexibility, if I'm correct.
Can you just clarify for Councillor Blake, if you were to put forward the proposal proposing that we extend the existing hours of operation by 1 hour at either end, would that breach the application that's before us today, or does he have the capacity to put that forward as an acceptable proposal given the application that sits before us today?
If in doubt, always go back to the application form and see what was applied for. The application description here is section 42 planning application to not comply with conditions number 19 and 24 planning permission 93 TP 1149. I think we've established that number 19 isn't really applicable because it's already been granted. And condition 1 planning permission 11P 10354. So it's not to comply with those conditions, which is tantamount to saying that you're removing them. Now, it is my understanding that under the Act you've got to consider those conditions alone, but it is open to a planning authority to attach new conditions. If my reading of this is if they are not complying with those conditions, then that is pretty blanket. It's wholly not complying with those conditions. Whilst the authority would be at liberty to vary the hours, that's really not what's being applied for. Oh, Janice, give me a very useful quote from here's one you prepared, Arda. It is section 42 of the Act. If you really want, I can read it all out. But the section applies. I'll try to summarise it. Yeah. On such application, the planning authority may consider only the question of the conditions subject to which planning permission should be granted, and A, if they decide that planning permission should be granted subject to conditions different to those subject to which the previous permission was granted, or that it should be granted unconditionally, they shall grant planning permission accordingly. If they decide that planning permission should be granted subject to the same conditions, then they shall refuse the application. So effectively all you're doing is looking at the terms of that condition. You can't use this as a method to suddenly decide that you didn't like the Morrison store there in the first place. So it is very narrow down to the conditions which are specified. So not complying with those specific conditions I would read as effectively saying they can deliver at any time.
That's what the application says, and I think every member understands that. I think that the subtle question was, if a proposal were put forward, and let's say for discussion's sake, it was no deliveries after midnight and no deliveries before 5 AM, would that fit with a legitimate proposal being put forward by a member of this committee and found to be acceptable by the governance officer? Or would we have to refuse it and hope that an alternative proposal came forward from the agent's applicant or the applicant?
Gosh, you do like your questions, don't you? What they've applied for is non-compliance. Hypothetically, were you to say, if they'd applied for an application to say to change the hours, that would be absolutely clear. For non-compliance means to me what is being sought is that they are not wanting to comply with that condition at all, therefore it's open season for deliveries. It is open to you to attach a different condition, but that is obviously not what's really been applied for.
I think the comfort in the question set by Councillor Blake is that the agent, and I'll ask him just to clarify, he said that basically the window of opportunity before store opening wasn't quite long enough, and he looked for an hour and a half before that, 45 minutes to unload the vehicle, 45 minutes to stock the shelf, which is an hour and a half before opening time. So that would be 6:30 if you take the opening hours. And I think what Councillor Blake is...
I don't think we can change applications halfway through an application. The applicant has put it forward as is. We can't ask him if he wishes to change that halfway through.
We're not asking him. I was clarifying what he actually said. He said they weren't, although they were asking for a waiver of this condition, which is what they're asking for, he said that custom and practice doesn't suggest a vehicle would arrive at 2 o'clock. And I think what Councillor Blake was looking to do was ensure that didn't happen by hoping to put a condition in that said you can bring vehicles earlier, but no a 24-hour window. And I was just trying to establish with the planning officer whether that was a legitimate approach to this particular application or whether we had to consider it as per the front page. And Paul is currently reading up on the...
Can I just say on that point here, I'll come in when we debate.
Yeah. So I've now got a number of folk. I've got Stephen first, and then I've got Ian again. Was it... Well, with due respect, we're still trying to establish what can and cannot be done. And the applicant's agent's still here for questions.
Can I just respond, Chair, by suggesting that we look at recommendation 1, and does that not cover everything, all the issues that we've got? You've got a year's trial. If it doesn't work, they have to come back anyway. It's only got to last a year.
Don't know that's quite the case. Okay, we'll be very careful then, since members are concerned about where we're going. Questions for the applicant's agent. I've got Councillor Thompson, Councillor Blake and Councillor Gedd.
Thank you, Chair. It was just a question on, in experience with the recent quiet delivery schemes with other premises, how long does it take to establish a working group between the relevant parties and submit that and then get it approved in writing by the Planet Authority, on average? Thanks.
There's 2 cases I've been involved with recently. One, the trial was granted on a 12-month basis, and there was no requirement for a quiet delivery system, so it's just underway at the moment. The other one, which we referred to in discussions with the officers, was in Hoyk. I think we got caught up a little bit in the lead up to Christmas, but if you sort of take out that sort of 2 or 3 weeks there. It was about 4 weeks to get. There is a draft quiet delivery system attached to the planning statement we submitted with the planning application. That's the basis of the system. What we would do is really just put the personnel involved in it. It's just the framework, but we would just fill it out, submit it to the officers, and then it will just be agreed over a course of. It doesn't have to take very long. It's quite straightforward.
Just to follow that up, and similarly with illumination schemes, I don't know if that's you've come across, but again, does that take a similar amount of time to get agreed and approved?
No, we haven't been. This is the first time we've been asked to look specifically at illumination, but this won't be something new to Morrison's. Under this type of application, I haven't had to deal with this before, but we do other applications for Morrison's. So when we're doing their new store applications, service yard lighting is something that's usually involved in that. So it will be, we can deal with it quite quickly. It's not new to Morrison's.
Thanks, Stephen. Councillor Blake.
Very briefly, Chairman, my apologies for asking the question of the agent because it seems to have stirred up a bit of a hornet's nest. And also to say that I'm quite prepared to let that go just now and let us get into debate. And of course, I may very well consider it when it comes to deliberation.
Thanks for that, Councillor Geddes.
Thanks, Chairman. Mr. Karras, would you tell me clearly and unequivocally, in words of one syllable, just exactly what you're applying for here today on behalf of your principals?
We have applied to allow greater flexibility in terms of when store deliveries can take place at the store. At the moment, they're restricted, and we would like to have the ability to deliver beyond what the current restriction is.
So that was the question, Mr. Corus. The question was, are you asking for 24 hours, or are you asking for an extension to what's currently in existence?
Thank you, Chairman.
Sorry, we're asking for an extension to what's currently in place.
And presumably that, Chairman, that extension, depending on future circumstances, could in fact be it could be any time within the 24-hour envelope, Chairman, depending on future possible circumstances.
I wouldn't want you to become confused, Mr. Corus. I'm not being unkind. The application is to waive the current restriction, which would allow your organisation or the applicant 24-hour delivery.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if the applicant's not actually wanting that and you say they're not wanting that, then we will be in a position where we all can limit this because it'll be by your agreement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's absolutely fine. I fully appreciate that 24-hour deliveries is what could be granted here, but Morrison's would at the same time be happy with an extension. And we think that we've applied on that basis to allow for an extension to new hours if that's the wish of the council.
Well, Chairman, can I ask then why the application is couched in the terms it is? Because it seems to me, sir, that all that's happening here is that, you're encouraging obfuscation, or your principals are encouraging obfuscation in relation to this application. I mean, apart from anything else, sir, and I know we're not in debate, Stranraer's open for business, or at least some of us take the attitude that Stranraer's open for business, and we would like to see it remain so. And this is doing no favours whatsoever, as it were, to the functioning and the work of this committee.
I know Councillor McCaughey's wanting in, but it might be, given the situation we find ourselves in, that the best plan may be to defer this for a month to establish exactly what Morrison's want and that this be brought back to us. But I have to be fair and let Councillor McCaughey in before you come back, Councillor Geddes.
Thank you, Chairman. It goes right back to the point I made at the beginning of this debate about this report and the recommendations in its report. Because this sounds even worse now, because I was told when I asked my questions at the beginning, well, this is for 24/7. Now we find out for the applicant, he's not wanting 24/7. I mean, I certainly agree, get this taken away, and I want a competent report here at the next meeting. And I think the applicant and the planning officer should get together and decide what this case is all about. Because this is not acceptable, presenting a report like that now turns out, having heard the applicant, is totally different from what we were told at the beginning of this debate. I'm not very happy with this at all, Chair.
I think we have to be careful with terminology. I'm happy it's a competent report. We've discovered that what's being applied for isn't necessarily what the applicant wants, and I think that that's why we need to readdress this. Councillor Geddes.
Hence, Chairman, my use of the term obfuscation. As far as I'm concerned, you know, the applicant either wants, in fact, an extension to the delivery times and hours that they currently have, or alternatively, they want an unrestricted right, as it were, depending on future circumstances, sir, to deal with this within the relevant 24-hour period. And to do that, it would seem to me, you know, there's no halfway house in this. And this, we have an application which says A, and it seems to me, with due deference to the agent, that he's encouraging, you know, the committee to accept that, you know, they really don't want A, they want A minus or they want B. And this is not the basis, as far as I'm concerned, of good, sound decision making. And that's why I'm trying, at the end of the day, to get clarification as to just exactly what's requested and what's required. And maybe the way to bring this to a head, and I hesitate very much to say it, standing my earlier remarks about Stranraer being open for business, and some of us would like to see it remaining open for business, maybe the way to deal with this and get it clarified properly is to refuse this application today on the basis of uncertainty, for want of a better term, and get a proper application submitted to the next possible meeting of the committee. I'll not make that a motion because, as I've said, the last thing I want is, it's hard enough, to, if I may use the colloquialism, Chairman, to turn a pound in Stranraer at the moment. And I don't want to be part of any planning committee decision which makes that, or possibly makes that even more difficult, as it were, for people who are working hard to try to make a living in the town.
I think we're going to find ourselves in a situation where we're in an unsatisfactory position, and I think we're going to have to defer it. Personally, I think we should defer it because it causes a problem for a refusal when it may be that the applicants actually want the 24 hours. And I think for further clarity, we defer it for a month, ask officers to liaise with the applicant's agent and the applicant and bring back a specific report that clearly outlines exactly what would be acceptable to the applicant. And it's unfortunate we find ourselves in. But it's sometimes helpful that debate brings out that particular aspect of it. Councillor Dryborough.
She's got to say, can we get any debate, then we might help this along.
If no one has any further questions for the applicant's agent, then thank you very much for coming today, sir. If you'd like to take your seat. Members are now in session.
Chairman, I'm happy to second you. If you've moved a motion to continue this to the next meeting, happy to second.
Okay, I propose that we defer this for 1 month to get a specific detail on exactly what the applicant wants in conjunction with the discussion with the applicant and his agent. Councillor McCaughey seconded that. If Councillor Driver and Councillor Geddes looking to speak.
Chair, there was some suggestion earlier on about the amend the recommendation, and I was quite happy with his recommendation because it was about removing the conditions 19 and 24 on a 24-hour basis. Now, I'm happy with that. And the reason why I'm happy with that is that when you think about drivers and their deliveries and things like that, you look at the winter conditions that we've had around about here, it could be 2 o'clock in the morning that the driver turns up at that particular area. So therefore, I'm quite happy with the understanding it was 24 hours, it was a removal of condition 19 and 24, and go ahead that way.
The problem with that is if there are no staff to unload the vehicle and they're all scheduled just to work an hour beforehand, then the driver will sit with an engine running for 3 hours when they empty the vehicle. And it's no our job to manage how Morrison's work. That's the big problem with this. That's
absolutely, Chair. And the thing is, that's an operational matter between Morrison's and their staff. This is a planning condition at the end of the day, and then what we're looking for is the removal of condition 19 and 24. So there's 24-hour delivery, and the other recommendations that was mentioned earlier on, and David was going to put a set of words together that this could actually happen.
Councillor Geddes.
Well, let me say for the record, as no for the first time I agree entirely with Councillor Driver, but we've got a procedural issue here, and I will move as an amendment, sir. You have moved the motion, duly seconded, suggesting in fact that this be deferred for a period of 1 month. I will move an amendment that this application be determined today.
Councillor Blake.
I'm quite happy to second that.
It's been seconded by Councillor Driver, Councillor Blake. Okay. In that case, we have a motion and amendment. I take it there was a seconder for the motion. I think it was Councillor McCaughey.
So the motion proposed by Councillor Dempster, seconded by Councillor McCaughey, is to defer consideration of this matter for 1 month to seek further clarification from the applicant on the extent of the hours that they're looking for. The amendment proposed by Councillor Geddes, seconded by Councillor Dryborough, is to continue to determine this matter today. Chair.
Motion.
Councillor Blake.
Amendment.
Councillor Dryborough. Councillor Geddes.
Amendment.
Councillor Groom, here is he. Councillor McCotry.
Motion.
Councillor McComb.
Amendment.
Councillor McKee.
Amendment.
Councillor Ogilvie.
Amendment.
Councillor Thompson.
Amendment.
Councillor Witts.
Amendment.
2 and 7. 2 and 8. Yep, that's 2 votes for the motion, 8 for the amendment. Amendment is carried. The committee will determine the application today.
Okay, members. We are in session. Councillor Dryborough.
Thanks, Chair. As I said before, there was some, I think, slight amendments to the conditions, which said there was 24-hour grant to remove condition 19 and 24, the previous one. I'm happy to do that, including the amendments that Councillor McCarthy had said in condition 1 to 24 hours, plus the discussion that we had on condition number 2, which we talked about residents and things like that, and I'm sure David had some wording on that effect.
He's already at work doing that. Councillor Geddes.
I'll second that, sir.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. I'm just it's just an observation really about recommendation 1. So if we decide today, the 12 months starts today, but that's without any of these other conditions being submitted and approved. So I'm just thinking, would it be wiser maybe to get these other conditions submitted and approved first before we actually put the start date of the 12 months? Trial period, as it were. Just a suggestion. I don't know how other members are minded.
Well, it's from the date of this permission, not necessarily the date of today. It'll be whenever the permission's issued, and that might be only when certain conditions are met. I've got Councillor Dryborough, Councillor Blake.
Chair, the applicant said it's only going to take 4 weeks to get these groups together, and I think it's as from today the decision's actually made. So if it's only going to be 4 weeks, it's only, it'd be quite easy for planning enforcement officers or environmental health officers to go along to this particular meeting, and I'm sure Morrison would be quite happy to get it done as quickly as possible.
Thank you for that, Councillor Blake.
If it was a motion to approve, I'd like to put an amendment that we do approve, but vary the hours between not to take place within 2200 hours and 0600 hours.
Okay. Do you have a seconder for that motion or that amendment? In that case, the amendment falls. We have a proposal. Agreed? Okay. Can David just sum up and then Paula will...
Okay. What I've got here is that condition 1 would be slightly expanded to read that the permission for 24-hour deliveries is hereby granted only, just as there. What I've worked up for condition 2, don't worry, Paul, I can pass this on, is that no deliveries within the extended time period hereby granted planning permission shall take place unless and until a quiet delivery scheme has been submitted to and approved in writing by the planning authority. Such scheme shall include details of A, the establishment of a working group between the applicant, the council and neighbouring parties, and B, a noise monitoring scheme to be undertaken during the 12-month period specified in condition 1.
Are members satisfied with that? Okay, thank you. Paula, you've nothing to do except sum up.
Committee is determined to approve the application subject to the conditions as amended by the committee.
Thank you. Thank you, members. Okay, we're going to item 9, application. Oh, sorry. We have a member out declared an interest. Okay, members, we come to item 9. Application for non-compliance with condition 18 of planning permission 03/P/C3/0150 to allow 24-hour operation of petrol filling station at Tesco Filling Station, Glasgow Road, Dumfries. Full planning permission applied for, and case officer is Andrew Robinson. Andrew, if you'd take us through your presentation, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yes, this is another application under Section 42 of the Town and Country Planning Act to vary Condition 18 of that planning permission reference number, which was actually the approval for the whole of the Tesco Extra Superstore at Cuckoo Bridge. So this is the site, for those not familiar with it, which is identified in red, and it just shows some of the surrounding features. The petrol filling station itself is located on the right-hand side of the site, adjacent to Glasgow Road and adjacent to the entrance to the site into Cuckoo Bridge. Next few slides are some photographs of the site. So this is the filling station itself. This is looking towards the north, which is to the exit of the site and to Cuckoo Bridge Retail Park. This is looking west towards the main superstore. And these next two slides are to the nearest neighbouring property. So this in the foreground, you can just see some properties on Beach Avenue. And this is looking to the southwest, which is looking at properties on Somerville Crescent. And these properties are situated around about 100 metres away from the application site, which is the filling station. In the application, a noise assessment was submitted, which contains noise readings as part of an assessment on residential amenity and potential noise that would be heard. And the assessment position of where these noise readings were taken from is identified by a cross, which is located next to the houses on Somerville Crescent when they were taken from when it was being built, highlighted in green. So just to the right of there is a cross. That's where the noise assessment position was taken from, and all references in the report to noise are from that position. After assessing this application with the relevant supporting information, it is considered that due to the distance between the site and residential properties, and that background noise levels in this area are generally higher as a result of proximity to local roads, and the fact that Tesco Extra is already open for 24 hours, it's considered that a proposal to operate the filling station for 24 hours will not adversely affect residential properties. Also, local roads interests will not be affected, and therefore this application to remove the previous condition, which would allow 24-hour operation of the petrol filling station, is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Andrew. We're in questions to officers. We've got Councillor McCaughtrey. Okay, Councillor McKee. Okay. In that case, if there are no questions for officers, we're in session. Councillor McCaughtrey, followed by Councillor McKee.
Yeah, I mean, I see no reason to lift the restriction that's there, because it's not there for what would appear to be a partner's report. Those of us who were on the Nistale Area Planning Committee at that time, I was subject to police advice as well, that 24-hour garages tend to attract not just people filling up with petrol, but tend to attract youngsters. Indeed, there is a record of that at the 24-hour garage in St Michael Street at the moment. From time to time, that becomes a magnet for youths and does cause a bit of loss of amenity to neighbouring properties. There are two 24-hour garages in Dumfries at the moment in any case, but I think that the good reason for putting that restriction, that particular garage, that hasn't altered in 10 years. It's based on experience of elected members and police at one of their 24-hour garages. It does not attract people just filling up with petrol. It attracts others who tend to congregate there, particularly in wet weather, and they do tend to cause annoyance to the neighbourhood. So I don't see any reason to lift that restriction.
Councillor McKee.
Well, Chair, I'm obviously the exact opposite for that. Given that the store's open 24 hours a day, I don't see there's that much additional noise at the filling station. The distance from residential properties is such that the noise that's created by the superstore will not be added to that greatly by opening the filling station. Regarding people congregating, well, we've got McDonald's up the road, and they can congregate there as well. I don't think congregation of people will be an issue there at all, and it can be addressed by police, given we've got some left by the time we're finished here. But I'd certainly go with the proposals, Chair. Move I'll go with the proposal.
Councillor Dick, followed by Councillor Geddes.
Thanks, Chair. I appreciate the feelings and experience of local members, but in reading the paper, for me, 4.7 really was the defining issue, where it says that in this instance, the petrol station is situated in a site that already operates on a 24-hour basis, and therefore noise is unlikely to be significantly different experienced by those neighbourhood properties. I really would respectfully say that I suggest that that's sufficient for us to grant this application.
Councillor Geddes.
Agree entirely, Chair.
And I think there is a subtle difference in that the other one sells hot food, etc., and this is simply an outlet for store and occasional things like crisps and chocolate. Councillor McCaffrey.
It's not just a filling station. There is a shop there as well where people can purchase all sorts of stuff. I would make the point about the store being open 24 hours. That is quite correct. But the store does have a security guard on duty, and anybody who's the worst aware of drink, I think they've all learned in that area over the years, they get turned away. They don't even get in to buy cigarettes there at the moment. But I think there was good sound reasons. The local people wanted this because they saw what happened elsewhere. The police were supportive of that, and I'm just merely saying I see no reason to lift it. There's no good reason for anybody in that area to have this wished upon them.
Thanks, Councillor McCaffrey. Okay, well, so far we have no proposals. Are there any proposals? Councillor Dick? Councillor McKee? Oh, you did make a motion. Okay, Councillor McKee's made a motion to approve, and Councillor Dick is prepared to second that. Councillor McCaffrey, do you have an alternative proposal?
To refuse.
Do you have a seconder for that? In that case, the proposal falls and the application is granted. Paula, can you clarify the decision, please?
The committee is determined to approve the application unconditionally as set out in the report.
Thank you. Councillor.
Yeah, it's just an observation. This application and the previous one weren't too far apart, yet the understanding of the report on the second one was far easier for members, even down to the sound readings that were taken before the application is made.
I think we do try to standardise reports as much as we can, but there are individual officers that write up the reports and they maybe have different methods of doing so, but I'm sure David will take that into account when he's doing staff briefings. Councillor Dryborough?
All I would say, sir, Chair, is every little helps.
Aye, fine. Very good.
I think she declared an interest, pal.
Okay, we come to item 10. Change of use of private garden and car park to public car park at Well Road Car Park, Lockerbie. The application for full planning permission, case officer is Janice Kay. Janice, will you take us through your presentation, please?
Thank you, Chair. In fact, it's David Jinks who was the case officer, but as you're aware, he's now left the council. So before moving on to the photographs, I just want to highlight what Chair's just said. This is change of use of a private garden and car park. It's a private garden and a private car park. So when you see the photographs, you'll see that there is partly a car park already there, but it was a private one associated with the club, which we'll also see shortly. So this is the application site. And for those of you who have not visited Lockerbie recently, it's an area which is currently to the northwest of the railway station on a back road on Union Street, which then moves into Well Road. So the railway station is probably in the bottom right-hand corner. You can roughly see it there. This is a close-up, and you can see that it's in the same aspect facing north, and there's a layout for 31 houses. You can also see that there's an area which is slightly greyer, and that's the area which is not used at the present time, but is used as a private garden. The area to the north is the public garden. There's the private garden, is the private car park. Get the words right. Okay, so let's... Yes, I know. All right. Will I start over again? Right, okay. So the club is on the right-hand side, and you can see the private car park in front of you. And as you go along, we'll go through the photographs, we go around the site. I might go into the site in a moment, let's see. So this is moving down the road and the street, Union Street, and you can see the back of the club, and you can start to see the existing car park, which is used obviously by the club. Swinging round and going down into the site and looking back at the club, you can still see it, but you're starting to see on the left-hand side the garden area, which is associated with the club. A bit more, and this is actually now coming down the road. Now, I'd like to point out at this time that the Wells Street is actually curved, and this is relevant to one of the conditions. But you can actually see that there's a wall, and behind that wall is the old garden. This is the remnants of the garden looking over the wall. And this area will be retained. It's an existing alleyway. Looking over the alleyway into the area which is now the old garden. Looking back down the other direction, so the car park which will be formed is on the left-hand side. This is standing within the bowling club area looking back and swinging to the right. So the proposal, in fact, just to confirm, I'll get a better photograph of it all. Is actually to take that car park, make it public, and also to take the area to the left, which includes all of the trees. Now, for those people who actually catch trains, you're probably aware that that is a private car park, and that as a result of that, a lot of people use this particular Well Road. Because it's actually got quite a large curve on it, you can leave your car there and wonder whether or not it'll be successfully left. What you need to do is to look at the recommendation in relation to the roads. They've actually asked in conditions number 8, the traffic regulation order is put in place in order to regularise those particular difficulties which are occurring at this present time. So the condition says that the development hereby granted planning permission shall not be brought into use unless a traffic regulation order for a package of waiting restrictions on Well Road and Union Street to be agreed in writing with the Planning Authority in consultation with the Roads Authority has been successfully promoted. So in a sense, what the overall package will do is bring into place a proper public car park, but at the same time address an existing problem with the parking on Well Street and Union Street, Well Road and Union Street, and that's the intent. But the additional problem is that we're actually losing quite a bit of landscaping. And in that context, a condition has been attached to ensure that within the car parking area which is proposed, I think you go back to the original plan, there will be landscaping put in place. And it's on that basis that the proposal is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Janice. Any questions for officers? Councillor McKee, Councillor Dick.
Is it the case you've moved the access round the corner as well, Janice?
Councillor Dick.
Yeah, just to be clear there, the Mid-Annandale Club retain ownership, but we do the work to turn it into a car park.
The application is, the site is owned by Mid-Annandale, and the application advises that the council has notified them as to the relationship from this point on, and those circumstances are not part of the planning consideration. But the correct notification has been carried out in the planning application. So they were notified as owners, and how, if planning permission is granted, how the other parts of the council take that aspect forward is for them to resolve, not part of the planning process.
Ian, just to follow up, I know it's not planning, but obviously that with budgetary and other implications, that would then go to, as you say, to another part of the council for further consideration.
Yes, whether it will involve elected members, I don't know. Whether it's that's really very much out with my remit.
Councillor Geddes.
Thanks very much, Chair. Continuing, I'm well aware, Mrs Kay, that it's not strictly speaking a planning issue, but continuing in the same theme, Clause 11 of the proposed conditions, sir, it makes reference to planting, implementation of planting and maintenance schemes, etc. And if you go to the top of page 88, it says, in fact, that the approved scheme, the approved scheme, bottom of page 87, top of page 88, the approved scheme will be maintained and replaced where necessary to the satisfaction of the planning authority for the lifetime of the development. Who will be responsible, Chair, for the upkeep and maintenance of that scheme?
Well, I presume it wouldn't be the planning authority. I'd presume it would be whoever eventually adopted it or took responsibility, but I'm sure Janice might be able to help us with that.
Well, you're quite right. The condition is a recommendation in relation to this planning permission, but who implements the permission takes on that responsibility.
So ultimately it'll be the council, because the council are applicants. The council will no doubt adopt the car park, and what the mechanism is to achieve that, I'm not sure.
Well, that, with the greatest of respect and with your leave, sir, is exactly the thrust of my question. I suspect it'll be DG first, and to use the colloquialism again, gonna tell them. Because at the end of the end of the day, and Jim McComb knows exactly where I'm coming from, 10 years ago, there was land sold in Newton Stewart to provide a much valued link footpath from the Sparland Bridge up into Masonfield and Moniaive. And it wasn't until after the onset of the multi-member wards in 2007 in mid-Galloway that I had to drag DG First screaming and kicking into the room to accept that they had a responsibility to upkeep and maintain that area. And again, with the support of my two mid-Galloway colleagues, I'm even getting a lighting scheme put in place now. It seems to me, sir, that if ever there was a case of joined up working required, it's in instances such as this. We sit here today without anticipating the decision, in fact, that will come. Presumably we give planning consent, there's a condition there, and yet, in fact, it never seems to be tied up with the relevant council department. So you have the absurd and the bizarre situation, if Newton Stewart Moniaive is anything to go by, where, in fact, these conditions are granted, these consents or applications are granted, the conditions are put in place, and nobody ties it up. Talk about bringing the council into disrepute.
I think that's maybe something we need to revisit at another date, because you're absolutely right, and Janice has already said that the granting of planning application, or if we grant it, finishes our duty, if you like. And it's then up to the council corporate to determine how they achieve this. But you're absolutely right as well. When we grant a condition, or when we grant a permission with a condition, it should be in the knowledge that that condition, because we're always told we can't make conditions that can't be enforced. So we should be maybe comforted by an agreement being presented as part of the document saying this is in place. Janice wants to come in, and then I'll have Ian.
Can I just clarify one point? The actual applicants this time, whilst it says it on your papers, but when you go into the applicant's detail, it's actually DG Design who are actually applying. In relation to there's one other further aspect. In relation to the landscaping aspect, I specifically asked, because of loss of trees, that we address this so they are fully aware of the conditions. So they're not being added without, because originally they weren't proposed. And I was concerned about the loss of trees, and I said, you need to go back and we want landscaping. And so there will be a responsibility, so they are fully aware of it.
And this is not a criticism of you, Janice, and I know I don't need Alistair to say that, nor is it a criticism of the planning authority. But maybe some architect drew a few trees and said, that's exactly what we'll do. But that doesn't establish responsibility and the ongoing cost, which is, I suppose, what Ian's going to make refer to as one of your budget team. Ian?
Yeah, something like that. It's just following on from the logic that Councillor Geddes articulates, it strikes me that what is the point in us going through the entire cost, and you can maybe enlighten me as to what discussions I've had, but what's the point in DG Design going through making a planning application, which obviously is a fairly costly affair, if it turns out subsequently that because they haven't spoken to the relevant departments in the council, that it's wholly impractical. We're going through a completely useless exercise. Now, I'm not saying that that's the case in this case, but what it really means is that there's a necessity for the departments to be speaking before an application is put forward to make sure that the practical applications are able to be taken forward.
I'll ask Janice to respond, but bear in mind that I can apply to build a house in Ian's garden and be granted permission, although practically it'll not happen because they'll not let me. So you've got to remember that we have a duty to discharge here, which has nothing to do with how DG First eventually achieve the goal of putting up and maintaining the shrubs and other items that are required by the planning authority. That rests somewhere else. Janice?
I can completely agree that we've got to look at it as well on the basis that if this was to come forward because of the loss of trees, we have a duty as the planning authority, whether it's Dumfries and Galloway Council who are applying or a private individual, to put that condition on and ask for maintenance, which we would do for any application. So we can't pick and choose it either as professionals. So the fact that in relation to the ongoing cost for the council, whilst it's not a matter of the planning authority, it is something which needs to be thought about in the submissions, and I acknowledge that, but it can't make a difference to how we consider the application or make recommendation.
Thanks, Janice. Councillor Geddes.
Chair, I trust I've made my point. I make no apologies for raising it because, as I've said earlier, it's precisely this lack of joined-up working that brings the council into disrepute with the populace of Dumfries and Galloway, whom ultimately we're here to serve and represent.
I would hope that some members of the DG First Committee who are here might have taken account of that. I've got Councillor McCarthy, Councillor Ogilvie and Councillor Macomb in that order.
Could you go back to the photographs, please, Janice? Yeah, that one there, right? Again, talking about joined up working. Can we maybe suggest, when they're busily tarring the car park, they take a look at sorting the road? Because this is, no, it's not funny. Because something you get for the public all the time, and I've actually had it done when they were working on this place there. Members of the public come along and say, well, these guys are working there, and a great big pothole up the road. Now, when we were working down this place, I did happen to phone up the roads guys and suggest there's a pothole not far away, since all the equipment was there, get the job done at the same time. That makes the council look sensible, because there's nothing worse. You have a brand new shiny car park, you look at the state of the road, you know, it's heading towards the railway station as well, so it's a busy road, that don't put it into condition, but a wee suggestion, bit of common sense, if you've got all the tarring machines there, tar the damn road at the same time.
Can I just say that's not part of the planning condition, it's something that we're not going to be dealing with today. But I'm hoping DG First members are taking on board the comments that are being made. Councillor Ogilvie and then Councillor Macomb.
Just to follow on quickly, that's the good part of the road. Round the corner, it's worse. Actually, I hear all the concerns, and I totally agree that, you know, and I'm sure somewhere they've spoke to each other, but I'd welcome this because somebody uses the train quite often from Lockerbie. Parking's an issue in that area. And so anything that alleviates some of the, because you see some weird parking further around there as a tight corner, you know, you could either get a fire engine up there and it was so serious. So anything that alleviates that area, I welcome. I take on board all the caveats that everybody's put in, and I don't sit on DG First. So.
I hope somebody in the room does it. So thank you. I'm sure you. He's trying not to indicate that he's a member. Councillor Macomb.
Thank you, Chair. I'm seeking an assurance that this is purely a public car park and that there are no reserved places for Annandale Club members.
Well, it's a privately owned car park that we're going to adopt, so maybe Janice can help with that.
Well, I think the title says it all. The applications for the change of use of private garden and car park to public car park. That's as far as planning can go. That's what the application that's been submitted. How a deal subsequently is set up between the landowners and the council, that's for the future. And I can't help you with that one.
I'm sure that doesn't answer your question. Councillor Witts.
Thank you. What's our statutory obligations then in terms of disabled places?
I take it that'll be dealt with, Janice.
You're challenging me on that one. That's the question which, let's see what the roads, I'm taking this application from David, who's not here. And as far as the Roads Authority is concerned, no objections subject to conditions. So what they will have done is looked at the layout as Roads Authority and advised us whether or not it complies with those standards. And as they've not raised any complaints, I would assume that they are satisfied with that particular provision. But I haven't got an answer.
Personally, I'd be disappointed if in a public car park there wasn't a provision made for a disabled space. However, again, it may be that that's not a planning condition and that's part of the condition that the Roads Authority would place. And it might be that in future we would get a comprehensive list of what the conditions with the Roads Authority is. Hey, Councillor Whitson and Councillor Drybrough.
Would that not become effective unless you had bays marked off? Is that what's planned?
Councillor Drybrough.
Chair, I can maybe put some advice to Councillor Whitson. There is quite a few disabled car parking spaces close to that actual car park in connection with the railway station anyway, so there is quite a considerable amount of disabled car park spaces available.
Thank you for imparting that local knowledge. Councillor Blake.
Just very briefly, perhaps I should have declared an interest in that case. Is that not a disabled bay at the top of that car parking space anyway?
I believe the bays are indicative that the exact detail is still to be presented.
No, I've got the Thank you, Chair. I've got the plan out directly. It is a copy of that one, and the lines that you're looking at, in fact, are the measurement lines. It's saying 4.8 and 2.5, so it's not laying it out specifically as a disabled car parking space. So in this particular scheme, which is what they're proposing, and it also shows a visibility display, which has to be retained. We can put a condition on, David, should that, to ask for the details?
David?
Would this require a building warrant? Because if it did, there is an obligation to it. I don't think it would. Yeah, I mean, you could either have a condition or a directive saying that the pro rata basis of disabled spaces shall be provided when the car park. That wouldn't be a problem.
I would have thought that the roads officer would have dealt with that. I really do. I'd be disappointed if the roads officer hadn't taken into consideration DDA compliance and dealt with that appropriately. And as the local member says, there are a number of disabled spaces nearby. We shouldn't get hung up on that, I don't think. I think we need to go and determine the application. The recommendation is to approve. Is anyone otherwise minded? Okay. In that case, Paula, can you just sum up, please?
The committee is determined to approve the application subject to conditions as set out in the report.
Thank you, Paula. The remainder of the items are for noting, so I'll deal with them one by one, but I don't expect, I don't intend to take any discussion on it. Councillor McCaughey?
I mean, I think it's been good that we get this reported back to us, because at least we know what's happening. I think it's interesting to note that out of the 7, the score is Council 5, applicants 2. So I think we're getting something right.
Okay, happy with that. Okay. Right, go to item 11, the appeal decision for information noting only. Dismiss the appeal and refuse planning permission. Councillor Geddes.
Well, I don't want to appear triumphalist, but I think at the end of the day, in a case like that, sir, the decision should be noted and approved. Because it's good, it's gratifying to know, in fact, that we did get it right. And it has been, in fact, been upheld in appeal. So I was suggesting, in that case, the decision should be not simply noted and approved.
The members and members
I see the governance officer grimacing. Perhaps.
Paula?
In the terminology used by the Planning Applications Committee, there is nothing here to approve. You can commend it, you can like it. There is nothing to approve, I'm afraid.
Chair, can I say it's been a long-standing tradition since Adam was a boy that, to use the phraseology, but on that basis we'll let it be simply noted.
Councillor Ogilvie, then Councillor McKee. Councillor Ogilvie.
Chair, I just agree with Paula. There is ones in here that were the worst decision this council's ever made, so I'm quite happy just to approve, to note.
Okay, Councillor McKee. Okay, well, I suppose that could be recorded because we have audible recording devices here, so members within reason can record their approval. So, item 11, item 12, item 13, item 14, item 15, item 16, item 17. Thank you very much for your indulgence today, gentlemen, ladies as well. No other business. Thank you.